All right. Yeah, I'm having issues again. My my countdown isn't working for some reason. Looks like the entire new screen, the stream is starting screen is kind of frozen there, so I don't know. Well, hello everyone, Freezing on Saturday again. Hope everyone's doing great. I don't have too much going on with me. I have to check my voicemails. I haven't checked that in a while. I have to check my mail. That is pretty much it. Work is going well. I haven't had a whole lot of time to play anything or to work on writing so much. So, yeah, got through the week, survived, and that is pretty much it. I'm gonna give a little bit of time for people to file in if they do. Yeah, that's really it. To start here, we've got some amazing clips from, I think they're all representatives from Ireland, either at the UN or in their parliaments or something like that, that we'll go through. These are people that I follow. I just followed one of these guys, like Mick Wallace, who's also from Ireland, and then Claire Daly, I think, is the other person. She's speaking at the UN, I think, representing Ireland or something. I'm not sure. But they're both amazing. What they have to say, they're like, a minute or so clips. We'll go through those, then we'll get into some capitalism, some sustainable and interstellar tech, and then we will get into some environmental stuff. I don't have quite so much planned for today. I think we go up to here. Nope, we've already done that one. Yeah, so this is the last thing I have, and these are going to be really quick here to go through. So I guess we'll see what happens. And if you guys have some links you want to go through, you can feel free to share those as well, and we can take a look at those as we go through the process. Yeah, that's pretty much it. You kind of see a little bit of my green screen back here because the lighting isn't quite perfect, and it kind of really annoys me. This is Mountain Dew, by the way. I'm trying to stay away from it, but weak today. Made some slight updates to my policies. Nothing major, but yeah, that's it. All right, so let's just go and get started. These last few weeks have been super quiet, so we will go through these, watch these videos really quick, and hear what these amazing people have to say. All right, these first two I think are about like the West and Israel's war crimes, and the next two are about the environment. Let me make sure I have this up enough so you guys can hear it. Browser. All right, here we go. This is going to be a joke. Yeah, this person I'm not sure. I haven't followed this guy yet, so let's see what they have to say.
What's the difference between a garden and a jungle? A garden's a nice place where civilized human beings walk around. A jungle is the heart of darkness, where wild animals live. Now, many people in Africa, Asia, Latin America remember very well.
And as a note, right here, this is Mick Wallace, if I'm correct.
How in the name of civilization, European colonialism treated them like wild animals, enslaving them, torturing them, and even exhibiting them in human zoos. Therefore, when the highest diplomat of the European Union compares Europe to a garden, but especially the rest of the world to a jungle, the message these people hear is that Europe is still driven by neocolonialism. We cannot let that message pass. What's the difference between a garden and a jungle? A garden's a nice place.
Oh, that's it. That was 44 seconds. Yeah, colonialism is something that the West is definitely still steeped in. I talk about that in my policies, and I talk about giving reparations, not just from the United States, but the UK, of course, and Europe as a way of helping deal with the horrors that the global North has inflicted upon the global South. All right, so this is, I just followed him today, Mick Wallace, and you saw him kind of in the back right here. So I guess these, I think all three of these are representatives to the UN. So let's see what Claire Daly, can you see her? She's like right next to Mick Wallace, I think. Let's see what they have to say. So here he says, we rightly have a problem with Russia terrorizing Ukrainians. We have no problems with U.S., NATO terrorizing people of Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, or no problem with U.S. plus EU helping Saudi, United Arab Emirates terrorize Yemen. Why have we no problem with Israel terrorizing Palestinians? So let's see what he has to say. This is a minute and 23. I should put on there are no captions on this. I apologize. Oh, but yeah, there is captions.
When Russia drops bombs on built-up areas in Ukraine, I have no doubt that the people in Ukraine underneath the bombs are terrorized. It's a form of terrorism. When the US, NATO bombed Afghanistan for 20 years and killed several hundred thousand and displaced millions, they were terrorizing the people. A UN survey showed that US NATO bombardments of civilians in Afghanistan, 45% of the people killed were children. When the US killed over 1 million civilians in Iraq, was that terrorism? When Israel terrorizes the Palestinian people every day, is that terrorism? When France and the UK and others armed the Saudi UAE to commit genocide in Yemen, where the UN said that over 400,000 are dead and 16 million are starving because of a genocide being carried out with the support of the US, the UK, France and several European states, is that terrorism? When he's going to wake up and start living in the real world?
Yeah, good words there. Must be Scottish, actually. All right, now this is Claire Daly. She's right next to Mick over here. Month after month, people of Afghanistan suffer and die, including 53 mainly Hazara girls last week. People at risk of genocide, and yet the world says and does nothing. What have these people done to deserve this? Time to speak up, stand up, and demand justice for Afghanistan. This is from October 4th, earlier this month.
Month after month we gather here, and month after month the people of Afghanistan suffer and die. They die from hunger, from lack of access to medicine, from earthquakes. They die because they want to send their girls to school. 53 mainly young women slaughtered in Kabul last week, and our president couldn't even mention them earlier. And increasingly they die because they are Hazaras. Hundreds murders, thousands persecuted. These people are at risk of genocide, and yet the world says and does nothing. And of course, now that the US and its friends have found a new theatre of war in Ukraine to test their weapons and launder their arms profits, Afghans are no longer needed. Discarded with all of the problems of 20 years of an intervention left at the hands of the Taliban, whom the US created. It is an affront that the Biden administration has spent $15.2 billion on military intervention and war in Ukraine, while seizing $7 billion of Afghan people's money. For God's sake, what have these people done to endure this endless horror while the world does nothing? It's time to speak up, stand up, and demand justice for Afghanistan.
Yeah, that's amazing. Like some people have been saying on Twitter that this is what the American left needs to be. It's not this, it's bullshit. And that's unfortunately pretty much what we have. The squad has been thoroughly corrupted, and they've joined the neoliberal, well, the entire neoliberal Democratic Party. They are no longer one of us. All right, so this is from Mick Wallace again. This is about climate change. Why does the military-industrial complex get a free pass despite causing 6% of all global emissions? Africa, with 1.2 billion people, has less than 4%. War is a disaster. Without peace, we will not have a stable climate. True statement. And we watched that video yesterday from that TEDx talk, which talked about something similar. Without peace, we will not have a stable climate, but US plus EU are hooked on war or climate change steroid. Exactly. And then, as I've talked about before, if you look at what is the real effect of war, especially the United States as the largest terrorist organization in the world. They've been doing the war on drugs, they've invaded Afghanistan, Iraq, right? Not only does the US military not really have to report how much it pollutes, but the indirect effects of the externalities of war, right? The external cost of war, the destruction of life, the waste of resources, the destruction of resources, the pollution, none of that is recorded. So I'm fairly sure if you take into account really the direct and indirect effects of the United States as terrorism projects, that the United States would be the largest terrorist, or not just the largest terrorist organization in the world, but the largest polluter, not only historically, but contemporarily as well. But let's go and listen to what Mr. Wallace has to say.
Is there something special about the military sector that makes its emissions not matter? Since the reporting of military emissions is voluntary, it doesn't happen. It only begs the question, why are we hiding the climate impact of the military-industrial complex from public knowledge? Estimates put the military sector at around 6% of all global CO2 emissions. 6%. Just remember that the global aviation is responsible for 2.5%, and the whole of Africa, with 1.2 billion, is responsible for 4%. And yet, we never talk about what the military is damage that they're doing. We tell ordinary people to turn their lights off and say nothing to the military-industrial complex. What about demilitarization? What about peace? Did anyone spare a thought about the climate impact of shoveling over 3 billion into Ukraine's war assistance? What country did a climate impact assessment when increasing their military budget? Without peace, we will not have a stable climate. War is a climate change steroid, and many people in here seem to be hooked on it.
Yeah, 100% truth. 100% truth. And that's, when you look at a resource-based economy, which I talk about, that pretty much everything you do will need to have a climate or environmental impact study, but not just a study on how that project will affect the environment, but also how it will affect humanity as a whole, not just local, but as a whole. Yeah, so this is such a great thing. And the video we watched last week, I will bring that up here for you so you could. I'll share it again so you can watch it. It's a really great TED Talk. Let me. Where did I put that? That here. I think that's here. Yes, right here. I'll go and throw that in here. I need to add this to my policies. Let me throw it over here. Loud. All right, actually, let me go ahead and share all these. I haven't shared all these to you yet. One, two, I think all these people are representatives from probably Ireland or Scotland. Ireland to the EU. And they're great. I just followed Mick. And then here's that talk here that we covered last week, which is talking about the issues with shifting to green energy, specifically talking about the global south and where a lot of the rare earth minerals are, and that the south is going to suffer disproportionately from the effects of climate change and so on. It's a really good talk, and it really made me think, and I need to add this video and some of the ideas from there to my policies. All right, so there you go. There's that. Let's go to the last one here. This is Claire Daly again. Hold on. Down. And we'll go through this. Here we go.
State sponsor of terrorism is a term of US law. It doesn't exist in EU law. But a Zelensky advisor called for it in the Parliament magazine, and here we are again reporting for duty. And all it will do is make peace harder to achieve. Exactly, of course, what the extremists want. No peace, no off-ramps, all bridges burning, and Ukraine a permanent abattoir in a suicidal holy crusade against Russia. So, if you want to start naming state sponsors of terrorism, let's do it. European sponsorship of Israeli terrorism in Palestine, Western sponsorship of Saudi terror in Yemen, ISIS, the product of French, American, British, Turkish and Gulf sponsorship in Syria and Iraq. Decades of right-wing US-backed terrorism against the Cuban Revolution, the Contras in Nicaragua, death squads in Guatemala, in El Salvador. Remember Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, horror after horror, terror after terror. There's nothing constructive about the pot calling the kettle black. Would you ever cop on, start championing peace and end the war which is patently in the interests of EU, Ukrainian and Russian citizens?
Truth. That's what I have to say right there. I mean, that's the fucking truth. Scatterbox, how you doing? Welcome. Yeah, I just started following her in the last week or so. She's some representative, probably Ireland as well, in the UN. She's amazing. There's a few more that Mick Wallace, he sits right next to
When
her.
Russia drops bombs.
And he had a bunch of great things to say. I shared those in chat. I don't know if you were here when I did that, but I can share those again if you like. Yeah, she's amazing. I followed her last week, I think. Then I followed Mick Wallace today, and they have such great things to say in the EU and about the US and the West horrors that they're inflicting around the. Claire Daly, yeah. Right here. I'll go ahead and share it.
State sponsor of terrorism.
Yep, hold on. Claire Daly, there's her Twitter account. MEP, I don't know what that means. Yeah, she's from Dublin, so she's Ireland as well. Irish rep to the European Union somewhere. She sits right next to Mick Wallace. This guy here. I'll share that to you.
Is there something special?
Yeah, this is the only place I've heard about her from Twitter. Who some people have shared some of her stuff, and it's like this. It's amazing. I love this sort of stuff because it's right on point. It's not holding back, and it's dropping the absolute truth bombs. This is what the American left needs to be, because it's not. You know, the squad has been taken over by the Democratic Party, and they're no longer a party. They're no longer representing the people. But this is what we need right here. This is what the left actually looks like right here. And we don't have that anywhere in the United States. So, yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. It's good to see that there's some people out there that are actually saying the truth, speaking truth to power. And it's rare, very rare to find, especially in this day and age where the corporations and the rich own everyone and they own everything. And we, the unwashed masses, us pathetic 99%ers, have no representation, no power anywhere in the governments at all. So, yeah, it's good to see that. I just wish that there were more representatives in the EU doing that, saying that. I wish there was anyone in the US saying that sort of stuff, but there isn't. No one in power, at least. Yeah. All right. So, welcome to my stream. Hey, Erica Vegan, how you doing? Welcome. How you doing? Left needs to get more assertive and call things out for what they are, including state. Yeah. Oh, exactly. That's exactly what needs to happen. But it's very hard to get any power or any media coverage if you're going to say the truth. It just doesn't happen because, of course, the media is owned by the corporations, which owns the government, so they wouldn't want to do that. Grizzly Bear! Woo! All right, here we go. Grizzly Bear! He made it. Nice and early, too. First 20 minutes. How you doing? Happy Saturday. Erica Vegan Soy. Neat name. Yeah, so I have, for those of you who are new, I've got my own policy site where I talk about politics and how we fix things. Are you guys gay? Definitely not gay. Well, I'm not, at least. Wife, kid, this is my blog where I've been blogging about politics for a decade. I do leftist politics. Yeah, I'm glad to have you here. Glad to see you. Hopefully your Saturday is going well and your week has gone well too. Okay, good. Good for you. Good for you. So we covered a bunch of stuff here by a bunch of MPs, members of the European Parliament, MEP members of European Parliament, Mike Wallace and Claire Daly had some amazing things to say. And then I shared this video from last week, which is about climate change and the global south. If you want me to share these again, I can share them. Any other questions or thoughts on what we just watched? Or if you want to watch them again, we can do that too, because they are pretty short. Less a minute or so, plus or minus. Got 2 by Mike Wallace, 2 by Claire Daly, and 1 by this guy. I don't know who he is. Here's Mike Wallace here. Claire Daly's over here. But this guy had something good to say too. Oh, here we do. I do support LGBTQIAP people. This is a nice, safe space for everyone. That's actually what got me into politics, was the LGBT issues. Starting with gay. You want to see Mike Wallace? I've got 2 from him and 2 from Claire. Let me move these around. All right, we'll go through this one again. This one is, yes, the Global North's war on terror. The Global North's terrorism. All right, here we go. Back.
When Russia drops bombs on built-up areas in Ukraine, I have no doubt that the people in Ukraine underneath the bombs are terrorized. It's a form of terrorism. When the US NATO bombed Afghanistan for 20 years and killed several 100,000 and displaced millions, they were terrorizing the people. A UN survey showed that US NATO bombardments of civilians in Afghanistan, 45% of the people killed were children. When the US killed over 1 million civilians in Iraq, was that terrorism? When Israel terrorizes the Palestinian people every day, is that terrorism? When France and the UK and others armed the Saudi UAE to commit genocide in Yemen, where the UN said that over 400,000 are dead and 16 million are starving because of a genocide being carried out with the support of the US, the UK, France and several European states, is that terrorism? When he's going to wake up and start living in the real world?
Good. Powerful stuff there. And this one is on, the military-industrial complex and climate change. There's a question asked by Abby Martin. Exactly. Mic drop. That at COP26 last year, she asked, she had somehow had the ability to ask Nancy Pelosi, how can the United States come to COP26 with any seriousness and not talk about the harms of the U.S. military-industrial complex? So it was great. It was great. All right, here we go.
Is there something special about the military sector that makes its emissions not matter? Since the reporting of military emissions is voluntary, it doesn't happen. It only begs the question, why are we hiding the climate impact of the military-industrial complex from public knowledge? Estimates put the military sector at around 6% of all global CO2 emissions. 6%. Just remember that the global aviation is responsible for 2.5%, and the whole of Africa, with 1.2 billion, is responsible for 4%. And yet, we never talk about what the military is damage that they're doing. We tell ordinary people to turn their lights off and say nothing to the military-industrial complex. What about demilitarization? What about peace? Did anyone spare a thought about the climate impact of shoveling over 3 billion into Ukraine's war assistance? What country did a climate impact assessment when increasing their military budget? Without peace, we will not have a stable climate. War is a climate change steroid, and many people in here seem to be hooked on it.
Exactly. And that's such an amazing message. And it's something that I've said, that if the United States doesn't stop being the largest terrorist organization in the world, we're not going to be able to do anything of value on climate change, because the destruction that the United States inflicts upon the world is horrific, and it contributes significantly to climate change. And it's just, if we can't do something about that, then we really can't. We have no chance at all. All right, I'll go ahead and share this. This is Abby Martin's question to Nancy Pelosi about the U.S. military-industrial complex. This also gives the text of it too. Let's open this up.
Wait a minute, I want to.
Here we go. All right, this is a little bit longer. It's 3 minutes, but it's an amazing question. And then you can also see that people in Russia have been freezing for centuries. They deserve the warming, I think. There's warming, and then there's global warming. We can't use having that much warming that ends up everyone losing our food and everything is probably not a good idea. But yeah, it is cold up there. My wife is from Belarus. It is cold as fuck up there. It's colder than it is here. I mean, by a buttload. In my opinion, my wife says otherwise, but got a bias going on there. Let's not go that way. The people aren't the problem. I mean, people are the problem. But this is about the government. You need to separate the governmental actions from the people. I do not support the government of Ukraine, but I do support the people of Ukraine who are suffering. I definitely don't support the government of Russia, because they're fucking horrible, but I do support the people of Russia who are also being harmed by what's happening in the Ukraine. This is not, by and large, a problem of the people. It's a problem of the people in power. People in power and the sociopathy that they get from having access to unequal power, and unequal resources, and all that sort of stuff. Like, fucking Putin has like $1 billion estate somewhere. That was all over Russian and Belarusian news. Russians are poor and they deserve cheap energy. Well, sure, a lot of Russians are poor. I mean, a lot of people all around the world are poor because capitalism. That's how capitalism works. Capitalism is about impoverishing the majority so that the top 10, top 1% can have the wealth concentrated up there. That's just the way capitalism is. Poverty, inequality, global suffering is a feature of capitalism. It is a feature of methods of exchange. It's always going to be that, as long as we are within a monetary system. And but yes, people shouldn't have cheap energy. They should have free energy. Deserve cheap energy from, well, no, it's not about deserving. That's a very antagonistic word here. This is my post, The Tension with Methods of Exchange. I share this all the time. I know my regulars are sick and tired of this post, but it's a 9-minute read, and it talks about how the existence of a transaction itself causes all this harm. That's where it all starts. Sure, Russians have cheap energy, but their government has diverted the resources. Of course, yeah, exactly. And that's really what it's going to come down to, is that we don't have an overpopulation problem. We don't have a scarcity problem, because we are currently in the age of artificial scarcity. Scarcity that is artificial, not real. If we stopped murdering each other and stopped competing, and we started sharing all of our resources, everyone in the world could have a level of quality of life that is higher than we've ever had. It's not that we don't have the resources to feed and clothe and house the world. We most assuredly do. It's just that the people don't have access to it. There's people who have unequal access to resources. The top 10% have most of the resources, while the bottom 99% have a significantly have access to significantly less resources. We have the resources to have an amazing life, but we don't have the appropriate distribution. Unearth deserves fresh milk every day, therefore we should invest in big farming in Africa. People, okay, so milk isn't necessarily a good thing. A lot of people don't have the genes for it. I'll go ahead and share you my policies here on environment and sustainability. Yeah, it isn't that good for people, especially the way we make it here. Free range, organic free range might not be quite so bad, but we're not, we didn't evolve the gene for that until about 6,000 years ago. After we'd already been 4,000 years in 4,000? Over 4,000 years into the Neolithic Revolution, into the Agrarian Revolution. So if you want to know what we need to be doing for farming, especially in light of climate change, what we need to be doing is basically, if the government had any brains, the federal governments of every single country would basically buy up all the farmland, or at least pay the farmers to shift to basically vertical farming, take 10% of their land, vertical farming, aquaponic, aeroponic, underground, and so on. That way they can grow food year round. It uses 10% of the space, 10% of the water, and it's organic. And then the other 99% of their farmland, they can rewild, plant native trees and plants and so on, and that will be a huge boon. Not only will the food be protected, the food production be protected from climate change, but you get to make even more food because you get to make food year round. You need to pay for food in Africa, especially French Blue Cause. Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Exactly right, Erica Vegan Soy. And what I say in my policies regarding that, I'm not sure where I talk about that. So it fits in two different places. I talk about reparations to the global south, specifically Africa. Let me go ahead and pull this up. Yes, reparations are a huge part of this, and nothing. Let's go down here. Yeah, so this section of my policies, I'll go ahead and share this for you. It's titled Bypassing the Harms of Demographic Transitions in the Global South. So what this is referring to is the Global South is basically going through the same process that the United States did to become a global power, which is going heavy into the fossil fuel age, which is, of course, what we don't want. So part of that is the IMF and the World Bank are methods of the Global South, especially, or the global methods for the Global North, especially the United States, to engage in economic warfare against the Global South. So, well, we need to disband or get rid of these organizations. China is buying up a bunch of U.S. farm. Oh yeah, I bet they are. And so Bill Gates has been buying up farmland, right, as well. And Bezos is buying up houses. BlackRock and Zillow's buying up houses. Oh yeah, lots of horrible things are happening because the rich, of course, have access to buy up all this stuff, and it's going to end up being bad for everyone in the world, especially as climate change moves on. Not good stuff at all. So the loans from the World Bank and the IMF need to be basically grants to the Global South, and the loans, which become grants, need to be restructured because the normal IMF and World Bank loan says you can't use the money we give to, or that we are loaning to you to make life better for the people in your country. It has to be made to advance your industry, and then basically you need to give all that, the advantages, all the products and resources from that industry that you're taking our money for, and give it to the global north, and basically leaving the global south impoverished. And if you look at these two here, like this is like the resources that are available in these areas, and most of which are being exploited by the global north and just taken. And like here, the global south it's never been poor, it's been looted by the global north. French committed generations of problems to Africans through colonialism. Yeah, World Bank, IMF, and UNICEF do count as reparations. Oh, okay, I wouldn't count the World Bank or IMF. I'm not as familiar with UNICEF's work, because World Bank and the IMF, that is loans, and those loans are done in such a way that it impoverishes those countries. UNICEF, not sure. But a lot of African militants steal resources the West gives them. Oh, right. And you're always going to have that sort of a thing going on in any country where there's high levels of poverty. If there's poverty, crime and corruption is always going to be a thing. So if the only way to end that in the U.S. government, yes, $3 billion in loans and possibly even grants to keep them from growing certain things and to grow certain things. And if they're growing all this corn and doing all this growing cattle and stuff like that, they're basically, yeah, we read an article on that. They're basically funding the end of humanity, funding human extinction just by virtue of their farming. So a part of what we need to do, it's not here. Okay, so it's over. Here we go. Yeah, like I was saying, you said, what did you say? Let me go back here. Colonialism. Yes. Oh, here we go. Reparations for colonialism. Oh my God. Okay. I'm going back and forth. Hopefully I didn't delete. Hopefully I didn't delete the section in it. Why aren't you going to where you need to go? Son of a bitch. Maybe I don't talk about it too much, write about it too much in here. Okay, so when it comes to reparations in the global south, the United States and the UK and Europe needs to be giving essentially trillions and trillions of dollars, I mean literally trillions per year, to the global south to shift to sustainable energy and to increase the quality of life for the people in these countries, talking Africa, Central South America, where the United States has been terrorizing for hundreds of years, and sending the global north is sending them trillions of dollars so that they can upgrade their quality of life for the people, education, healthcare, sustainable energy, conservation efforts, basically kind of a Green New Deal for the entire global south. And the quicker we do that is the quicker we bypass fossil fuels and the quicker we raise the quality of life for all the global south to basically first world status, so that you get rid of all that corruption, you get rid of all of that, all those problems that come from being an exploited country, which is what they are. The United States has been exploiting them for a very, very long time, and the global north in general. So we need to send them trillions and trillions to compensate for that, but also get them to jump to first world status and get them to jump to sustainable energy. And the global north has to fund it. Otherwise, it will never get done. That's just the way it is. Because the global south is being exploited and looted, and they're never going to have the money or resources to shift to sustainable energy, not without significant help. All right. Any other questions or comments on that idea? I've got this amazing question by Abby Martin from last year at COP26. I'm looking forward to this year's COP. It's going to be just as useless and pathetic as it was last year, I expect. Italy owes reparations to the UK because the Roman Empire conquered them many years. Rome. Yeah, I mean, that UK is the original colonizer, the original imperialist, right? What, there's another joke, right? Out of the 200 or so countries in the world, there's only 24 countries that Britain, or that the Roman Empire or Britain hasn't invaded. Something like that. I mean, it's pretty insane. All right. Pull this down some more? No, I can't. Okay, here we go. Let's listen to this. This is just an amazing question, and listen to how they're not answering the question, or how they're both of these people are going to be answering the question, because it's really sad.
Wait a minute. I want a woman. A woman. Gender equality here. Maybe I don't. Let's see.
Abby Martin with the Empire Files. Speaker Pelosi, you just presided over a large increase in the Pentagon budget. This Pentagon budget is already massive. The Pentagon is a larger polluter than 140 countries combined, how can we seriously talk about net zero if there is this bipartisan consensus to constantly expand this large contributor to climate change, which is exempt from these conferences? Military is exempt from climate talks.
Mike Wallace was talking about that too.
I just want to use an example if I can. You know, the sea level rise is an important part of what's happening to the climate. And I am not a defense person, but I've had so many talks with the Defense Department, with the Navy in particular, about how they have to respond to what's going on. So I really do think that there is no reason why what we're putting together, with Build Back Better and other things, can't respond to the Defense Department and have the same impact in terms of reducing emissions. And I do think that the Defense Department is very much aware of the fact that they have to play a major role, both from a strategic as well as, for the good of the world. So I don't see what we're doing in any way, or, increasing the defense budget as being something that's inconsistent with climate action. I really don't.
And may I just add that the national security advisors all tell us that the climate crisis is a national security matter. It is, of course, a health matter for our children, the water they drink, the air they breathe, etc. It is a jobs issue between good, clean technologies being the future of our workforce and the training for all of that. It is a national security issue because of the all of the conditions that climate crisis produces. I won't go into all of them, but they do are cause for migration, conflict over habitat and resources, and again, a security challenge globally. And then the fourth, of course, the moral issue that we need to pass on this planet to future generations in a responsible way. Now, recognizing what you said, we recognize that as well. And a big user of fuel. There have been many initiatives over time, more successful with more technology, to convert from fossil fuel to other sources of fuel to run the military, because it would make the biggest difference. Transportation, defense, these are two of the biggest, that can make the biggest difference in all of that, and that is something we're very, very focused on. As I say, the Defense Department sees this systemically, that we have to stop it as a national security issue, and one way to do that is to stop our dependence on fossil fuels, which exacerbate the climate crisis. With that, I thank you all for being here. Unfortunately, they're telling us they have to clean the room. I didn't know about that.
Because of all the brown people coming. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, how hydrogen power tanks. Hydrogen powered. Yeah, I mean, they can do that, but it's a waste of resources. U.S. Army Corps Rangers do a small part for environmental justice, but certainly is not enough. And yes, these politicians completely dodge. Yeah, exactly. So, and what I say in my policies is we need to gut the military budget by 75%, and we need to shift that all to protecting the environment, shifting to sustainable energy, environmental conservation and preservation, shipping that trillions of dollars to the global south is a method of reparations to help them advance themselves to a first world country and shift to sustainable energy, and to shift to a sustainable farming. We need to shift to vertical farming there in the global south very quickly, because they are the ones who are going to suffer most from climate change. The global south has done the least amount of pollution, but yet they are going to suffer the most from the harms of climate change. So, yeah, they didn't answer the question, and the military, military is a problem. We need to get rid of it. Military, bad. Oh shit! Get back here. And then I'll share my. Here's the post I had on that has a link to that. Has the link to this, as well as Greta Thunberg's talk there at COP26. All right. Any questions or comments kind of along that vein about climate change, the U.S. military, and that sort of thing? Let me change this. Hmm. Hmm. Okay. So this is from Dreams. Nope, but I will be back in a bit. How long? I stream for 3 hours, 2 Central until about 5, so we're at 2:45, another 2 hours and 15 minutes or so. So good. Thank you for coming back. I'll appreciate that. Good luck with whatever you're doing. Awesome. Thanks, man. This is from June of 2019. So this is well, it's a few years old. It's about 3 years old, a little over 3 years old. Common Dreams. It is titled, "No matter how long the Ukraine war lasts, weapon makers plan to cash in." Of course. And this is one of the reasons why so many military engagements happen, that the US military industrial complex needs war and violence globally so that it can keep making money. The United States is one of the largest exporters of arms in the whole world. Okay. A new proposal would slash protections against price gouging and ratchet up weapons production at well past Kiev's needs. Okay, no, this is October 20th, 2022. Wait a second. Okay, so that's what this picture is from. Sorry. There we go. So this is from 2 days ago. All right. As Russia's attack on Ukraine drags on, the world is dealing with a lot of uncertainty. At every stage, predictions about the war have done poorly when met with cold, hard reality of modern conflict. But one thing has been certain from the start: the U.S. defense industry is going to cash in. Yep. Proposal would give the Department of Defense wartime powers that would free it to buy huge amounts of artillery and other munitions using multi-year contracts. Yikes. A recent example of this came last week when Senators Jack Reed, Democrat, Rhode Island, Jim Inhofe, Republican, Oklahoma, proposed a new amendment to this year's National Defense Authorization Act, NDAA. The proposal would give the Department of Defense wartime powers that would free it to buy huge amounts of artillery and other munitions using multi-year contracts, according to Defense News. Here's the important part. The amendment would also authorize the Pentagon to skip competitive contracting for Ukraine-related deals, including billions of dollars worth of contracts to refill U.S. stockpiles, and it would waive other provisions aimed at stopping weapons makers from overcharging taxpayers, of course. As in, well, okay, so first, I mean, the reality is we don't actually have to pay for this, right? Because federal fiscal policy, Congress writes a law, and then boom, the money's there. Now they can shift, or they can force us to basically, compensate for that, but it's not required. As an unnamed congressional aide told Defense News, the move would allow contractors to produce far more than Ukraine needs. Instead, we're buying for a two-war front. It's hard to think of something as high on everybody's list as buying a ton of munitions for the next few years for operational plans against China and continuing to supply Ukraine, the source said. In other words, lawmakers and defense contractors are taking advantage of Ukraine to get their weapons wish lists, according to Bill Hartung of the Quincy Institute. It's part of the larger push to exploit the war in Ukraine to jack up Pentagon spending for things that have nothing to do with defending Ukraine or any likely future scenario, Hartung said. As Defense News notes, the proposed legislation also authorizes contracts for 20,000 AIM-120 advanced medium-range air-to-air missiles, which Ukraine has not fired extensively, if at all. The package also includes purchases of several other missiles that seem to go far beyond Kiev's wish list. Notably, it's unclear whether these weapons would actually be useful in the case of a U.S.-China war. It's building stockpiles for major ground war in the future, Mark Kansian of the Center for Strategic and International Studies told Defense News. This is not the list you would use for China. For China, we'd have a very different list. In related news, Lockheed Martin announced Tuesday that it plans to expand its production of the High Mobility Artillery Rocket System, better known as HIMARS, by more than 50%. The decision follows months of positive publicity from the weapons system, which seems to have sparked increased interest from governments in Eastern Europe. The announcement comes just a month after the Army said it wanted to double HIMARS production and triple production of certain types of artillery in response to the war in Ukraine. This type of boost would require new or at least dramatically expanded production facilities, raising concerns that it would be difficult to scale back down in the future. Ugh. So there's a little something there for military-industrial complex cashing in on the wars, right? Good stuff. Good stuff. Nothing bad will come of that, right? Any other questions or comments, suggestions about that before we move on? So we'll be moving on that into some capitalism for 2 and a little bit of tech, sustainable tech, and then we'll get into some more climate stuff. All right, this is from Patch. This is from a while ago though. Okay, so we'll keep this in mind here. This is from 2018, so this is September of 2018. So this is 4 years old. But I don't imagine too much of this is going to change. How hard is it to make an Iron Dome? I don't know much about it. Isn't it just like a missile defense system? Oh, Ukraine asked Israel? Oh, okay. So here we go.
Coverage of the ongoing conflict in Israel.
Okay, let's take a look at it.
Israel has featured recurring images like this: missiles streaming across the sky and exploding midair. These are missiles from Israel's Iron Dome missile defense system, a land-based system that intercepts and destroys short-range rockets and mortars. It has become a bedrock of the country's defense since its introduction in 2011. And in the current round of hostilities, Israel's military said the system has intercepted more than 200 of the more than 1,000 rockets fired towards Israel as of May 12th. Here's how the complex detection and interception system
20%
works.
Success?
The system is powered by missile defense batteries, each containing 3 main components. These batteries can defend across short-range rocket and mortar attacks within almost 45 miles of the battery. They are also mobile, so they can be moved to where they are needed. First, a radar unit detects an incoming rocket and relays information about its speed and trajectory to the battery's control center. The control center's computers calculate if the rocket is going to hit populated areas. If it is, a missile is fired from the launcher. Each launcher contains 20 interceptor missiles. Each receives constant guidance updates from the control center and its internal radar.
Yeah, I was just thinking, 1,000 missiles, and they intercepted 200. The question becomes how many were they fired at? So you're like, what is their success rate? I suppose is really the question. If they fired at 200 and they intercepted 200, that's pretty good. Then it's just about location, putting them where all the missiles are coming from. But yeah, 90% accurate. Okay, all right, good. Thank you for that. Good to know.
The missile destroys the incoming rocket by exploding near it. The goal is to do this far away from populated areas, minimizing damage on the ground. The defense system has intercepted over 2,400 rockets bound for civilian areas since its launch in 2011, according to an Israeli military spokesperson. During a conflict in 2012, the Iron Dome knocked down 421 rockets launched from Gaza and bound for Israeli cities before a November ceasefire. And during the 2014 war in Gaza, it intercepted 700 rockets fired by Islamist movement Hamas, a 90% success rate that effectively blunted the Palestinian group's aerial threat. The United States has provided hundreds of millions of dollars in funding for the system, and has also bought and is testing 2 Iron Dome batteries of its own. And Israel has expanded the defense system by installing missile batteries on ships, and the system is in the midst of being upgraded to combat the threat posed by unmanned drones. As the current conflict continues, so will the use of the Iron Dome.
Okay, so there's one video. Let's see, how much does Iron Dome cost? How much does iron cost? 50 million per battery. 100 to 150,000 per interception. At least by this. That's expensive, dear God. Wow. Wow. All right, does that get any more questions on that? Each missile is 40 to 50,000. This one says 100 million. So it's expensive, I guess. 50 to 100 million per battery, I guess. Yeah, no problem. No problem. All right. So, yes, this is 4 years old, but I'm sure this is still quite applicable today. Wealthiest companies in Washington employ thousands on food stamps. DSHS, not sure what that is, but I'm sure Walmart is a very similar situation. Workers at companies like Amazon, Starbucks, and Walmart, there we go, Walmart, receiving SNAP benefits according to state records. This is again the socialism for the rich and rugged individualism for the poor. It's the state sponsoring the wealth of the rich. All right, Seattle, Washington, some of the state's wealthiest corporations, including Amazon, Starbucks, and Fred Meyer, employ thousands of low-wage workers who receive public assistance. Experts say this is a phenomenon driven by low wages and tenuous employment arrangements like seasonal or on-demand work. Through a public records request, Patch obtained a list from the State Department of Department of Social and Health Services of the top 50 companies in the state, according to how many employees receive SNAP, Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, assistance. Walmart ranked with number 1 with nearly 4,000 employees, while Amazon, Safeway, McDonald's, and Uber are among the 9 companies that have at least 1,000 workers receiving SNAP. So Walmart is 4 times as much as, I guess, the next lowest, which is insane. One of the symptoms of low-wage work is these workers showing up on public assistance roles. That's not necessarily a bad thing in and of itself. It's certainly not great, but the issue is their wages are low, said Ian Perry, Research and Policy Associate at the Berkeley Center for Labor Research and Education. Patch reached out to several of the companies on the list. While many did not respond, some said the state list is misleading because it includes part-time or seasonal workers. Well, they shouldn't. Okay, part-time work, depending, one person could have multiple part-time jobs, so that's something that we would have to really get the stats on. But seasonal workers, they still aren't making a lot of money, and that's not good either. They're not able to make enough to live just off seasonal work, depending. Others highlighted good benefits. Fred Meyer's spokesman, Jeffrey Temple, said the company employs 16,666. The devil! In Washington, and just under 10% receive SNAP. 10% receive SNAP? That's still way too many. Way too many. Fred Meyer is investing in our associates and developing talent more than ever before, including offering a new industry-leading education benefit available to more associates, up to $21,000 to support their future and live our purpose to feed the human spirit, he wrote in a statement. So, sure, you can give them money, you can underpay them, and then overwork them, and then they never have the chance to actually take advantage of it, right? The state list. According to the state list, about 36,000 workers in Washington received SNAP benefits as recently as August 23rd. The federal government sets income guidelines for SNAP, but in general, a single person will qualify if they earn less than $1,945 gross per month, or about $12 an hour. Okay. The State Department of Social and Health Services is able to track where SNAP recipients work through application forms, but the department doesn't use the data for any particular purpose. According to officials, the state does not actively communicate the information to the companies on the list. The list contains a mix of employment types like seasonal or part-time. Babs Roberts, director of the Department of Social and Health Services, Community Services Division, said the department can query the list at any time and has done so only a few times on an ad hoc basis. The good news, Roberts said, is that the overall number of people getting SNAP in Washington has decreased in recent years. A healthier economy and increases in minimum wage have contributed to that, she said. Roberts also said the state may use SNAP data to target workers for job training or educational programs. There are about 1.1 million SNAP recipients in Washington total. Yeah, I think Seattle had their minimum wage increase. Let's see when that was. That's increase their minimum wage to. Oh, so they did that in 2014. All right, so this is 4 years after they increased, at least in Seattle, increased their minimum wage to $15 an hour. The state has a separate food program for legal immigrants who are not eligible for SNAP, but those figures are not included here. The gig economy factor. One standout from the list was the higher number of Uber employees receiving SNAP. The company claims that drivers in the Seattle area earn between $19 and $21 per hour before expenses, okay, which doesn't help, which range between $3 and $6.50 per hour. Uber did not respond to a request for comment, but workers in the rideshare industry say wages are lower than the company's claims. Kayla Gobena, who works in the app-based Drivers Association, said that driver wages have generally fallen in recent years. That's because there are so many rideshare drivers on the road. Some drivers have further reduced income by going into debt to buy a car to drive for Uber. Yikes. He was not surprised that thousands of Uber drivers are receiving SNAP benefits. In 2014, the fare was much better, Gobena said. If you had a passenger going from downtown Seattle to the airport, the net earning would be between $39 and $42. Now it's $19 or $18. We take out taxes and all the car expenses, it's even less. Joshua Welter, an organizer with the Teamsters Local 117 in Tukwila, said that Seattle needs to create a minimum wage for rideshare drivers. New York City passed rideshare minimum wage in August. Yeah, definitely. A minimum wage needs to apply to everyone, not just to certain parts. And we need to get rid of the minimum wage for servers and waitresses and stuff like that too, because that is so low. It's ridiculous. It's appalling, but unfortunately, not surprising that Uber is near the top of the list of companies whose workers are forced to rely on food stamps to feed their families. Weller wrote this is another reason why Seattle needs to follow New York's lead and pass legislation to guarantee that drivers receive a living wage. The public should not be subsidizing a race to the bottom in driver pay. Lyft also made the list at number 29 with 458 employees getting SNAP benefits. Constantly pushing us to go faster. Oh, I bet. Last week, Amazon became the second $1 trillion company in history. Meanwhile, in massive fulfillment centers across the U.S., including in Kent, Sumner, and DuPont, workers earning as little as $13.75 per hour toiled away packing boxes full of products bound for customers. Come on. Amazon's fulfillment centers are famous for tough working conditions. One employee told Business Insider earlier this year that workers urinate in trash cans because they were afraid that they would be punished for taking time to walk to a restroom. It appears, at least in Washington, that many Amazon workers are having a tough time outside of work, too. The company employs about 50,000 people in Washington alone, about 2.7%. 1,366 receive SNAP benefits. Okay, that's pretty low, okay. Amazon spokeswoman Lindsay Campbell argued that workers love the company's benefits and career advancement opportunities. Okay, no bias there. Full-time employees at fulfillment centers earn $15 per hour, she said, a figure that includes benefits like stock and health insurance. She also criticized the state's data as flawed because it includes season and part-time workers. We employ thousands of people in Washington state who choose part-time or seasonal roles. figures here are therefore misleading because they include people who only worked for Amazon for a short period of time and or chose to work part-time. Both of these groups would almost certainly qualify for assistance if Amazon was their only job during that year. There should be, most of these groups would certainly not qualify for assistance. Amazon was their only job during the year. Okay, we have hundreds of full-time roles available. However, some individuals prefer part-time for the flexibility or other personal reasons, Amazon's statement said. Come on. All right, last week, Democratic U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont introduced a Stop Bezos Act, which would require large employers like Amazon and Walmart to pay back the government for public assistance. Sanders is collecting stories through his website from Amazon workers, and his office shared some of those stories with Patch. Yeah, that's definitely what needs to be. Like, for my policies, how this would kind of play out is, it would be through the economies for the common good, where if you are paying your people so little that they require government assistance, that their taxes would go up, and they would be dinged for that, and their rating, the rating versus supporting humanity would go down. Choose to accept the part-time job because that's all was offered to them. That could be too. Yep, that could be. I mean, obviously they have a bias of the company has a bias towards protecting themselves, but yeah, that might be all that they have. Like during the off season, like not during Christmas, something like that, or the seasonal work time, yeah, they might only offer part-time. Okay, so been on food stamps entire time I've been working at Amazon. Back-breaking labor, terrible pay, and even worse conditions. No union backing. I feel like a slave, and if anyone complains, they will fire you on the spot. This is the 21st century. This is the 21st century sweatshop, said Jamal Raoul, who worked at a North Carolina fulfillment center last year. Others told Sanders' office that the Amazon benefits are indeed good, but don't pay the bills. How are they good if they don't pay the bills? Okay, interesting. A worker at a Washington fulfillment center told Sanders' office he makes $13.75 per hour and works full-time. He's a single father and earns about $2,200 gross per month, which puts him within the income guidelines for SNAP. They're constantly pushing us to go faster, he told Sanders' office. Yeah, and then a few weeks ago, we read the article of Amazon working on the bot, that a robot that can do a lot of the work for them, so they can start phasing out humans as a part of this process. Eventually, that's what's going to happen in the next decade or so, that Amazon and other companies like this are going to get rid of as many humans as they can and automate them, because they don't have to provide benefits to part-time people. They hire. Oh yeah, of course. Yep, exactly. Yep, part-timers don't qualify for benefits. Yep, that's exactly right. And a lot of companies will do that. Yeah, they'll hire a whole bunch of part-time people and as few people as necessary full-time, so they don't have to pay out the unemployment insurance and healthcare and all that sort of stuff. Yep, true. Very good point. In 2015, Perry is one of the authors of a study showing that 56% of working families in the U.S. receive some type of government assistance like Medicaid or SNAP. Jesus Christ. The number is probably still accurate in 2018, Perry said, although Medicaid enrollment has increased since then due to the Affordable Care Act. So, and a lot of this is going to be a lot higher than this, I expect, because the actual numbers that the United States uses to calculate poverty is way out of date. I mean, it's a formula from the 60s. And I talk about that in my policies too. We need to recalculate the actual poverty level. And actually, Peter Joseph also talks about that too. And I need to read into that more to figure out exactly how that would work, or what the more correct equation is for this day and age, and see how many more people really are in poverty. I expect, like here, it says 56% of working families in the U.S. receive some some type of government assistance. I bet you it's much higher than that that would actually qualify for government assistance if we had an actual reasonable calculation for what poverty levels are for income. I mean, it would probably be 60% or more of working families, if not close to 70% of working families that are actually impoverished because they're not making enough. The report blames wage stagnation and low-wage jobs as a major factor. Wages overall in the U.S. have been nearly flat over the last decade and have not recovered to the level before the 2009 recession, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. According to Perry, one of the best ways to reduce the number of working people receiving assistance is to raise pay. Who'd have thunk, right? An idea often thought to be tied to job loss. But in a 2017 study, the Berkeley Center for Labor Research and Education found that Seattle's $15 minimum wage law did not erode jobs in the food service industry. Washington's $11.50 minimum wage is the second highest in the U.S. In July, the state unemployment rate was 4.6%, according to the state data, a continuation of a steady decline that began in 2010. Yeah, and this is, I need to do a lot of research on this and write a blog post on this, but kind of figuring out how much unemployment goes up or how much inflation goes up when you have a minimum wage increase, because that's one of the big arguments that people have against minimum wage increases, that prices will go up. Well, sure. Inflation will go up. Well, sure, it will. A little bit. I mean, you got all these these memes talking about McDonald's in the Nordic countries paying $23 an hour, and you're paying an extra, I don't know, 30 cents for a Big Mac or something like that. I mean, it's not a 50% increase. It's a small percentage increase. Sure, there might be a small amount of increase in inflation, small increase in unemployment to start, but after that, it pretty much evens out. Much like they said here, it did not erode jobs in the food service. It will recover because the people at the bottom level have more money to spend. They have more money to spend. They have more money to spend, and that goes into the local businesses. And the businesses make more money, they get more business, and then you have to hire more people. So it's, if you want to make the economies better, you give more money to the people, not to the businesses. You give it to the people, the unwashed masses like us. We are the ones who spend the money. We are the ones who should get the money, because we will put it directly into the local economies and make everything better. Anything other than that is wrong. All right, wages are too low, and with minimum wage, we have really good evidence that minimum wage increase for low wage workers haven't led to employment losses. Perry said, raising wages is a very direct, simple way of addressing the problem. All right, here's the full list. I'm not going to read all of this. Let's see. Walmart, almost 4,000. McDonald's, almost 3,000. Uber, 1,500. Amazon, 1,500. Goodwill, almost 1,000. Yeah, Goodwill, horrible. Subway, almost 1,000. Home Depot, Taco Bell, almost 900. UPS, almost 800. Starbucks, 650. Wendy's, 550 roughly. Pizza Hut, 480. All right, there you go. And again, this is from 2018, so it's definitely dated. All right, any questions? This is the actual study there. So we want that. All right. Questions, comments before we move on? Yay, capitalism. Woo. Ugh. So this is from Time, so we'll have to take what they're saying for a with a spoonful of sugar here. Oh, this is Ghost Tag. I actually bought some of their stuff. They provide sounds for if you're going to mix music or something like that. They got really high quality stuff here. I'd like to get into making music a little bit, like specifically for my stream, or possibly making yoga music for the wife. But it's not easy. All right, so when was this from? Okay, this is 2 years ago, right? No, when is this from? That's okay. That's what this is from. This video is from that day. When is this article from? So you have the proper perspective. Okay, this is not short. Oh. I don't see where this is from. What date this is from? All right, I'm not sure here. It might be from this time, so it might be 2 years old. Did they here? I don't know. I'm not sure. All right, so title is The Top 1% of Americans Have Taken 50 trillion from the bottom 90%, and that's made the U.S. less secure. Of course. 3 minutes. Let's listen to this. This is Nick Hanauer. He's I don't know, is at least a millionaire or a billionaire venture capitalist. He's kind of been pro taxing the rich sort of a guy. He's pretty cool in this way. Let's see what he has to say.
Income inequality has always existed in the U.S., but the gap between rich and poor hasn't always been as wide as it is today. Let's take a look at how economic and political forces have changed the share of income held by the whole bottom 50% and just the top 1% of earners. The mid-century was a period of economic stability. The richest 1% earned 13% of all U.S. income, while the bottom half earned 20% of income. In the 1960s, Americans were still riding a post-war job boom. In the 70s, the lowest-paid Americans got a boost from a steadily increasing minimum wage. Sky-high salaries weren't as typical as they are today. The 80s changed everything. Minimum wage stagnated. Factory jobs were automated or outsourced. Ronald Reagan passed huge tax cuts for the richest, and executive pay soared. By the mid-90s, the earnings of the top 1% surpassed everyone in the bottom half altogether. The rich were on a tear, and even financial crashes in the 2000s didn't slow them down. Today, the share of income claimed by those at the very top and those in the bottom half are completely reversed from what they were in the 60s. Other countries don't have such a wide gap between rich and poor. Among economically developed nations, the U.S. is one of the most unequal, according to the Gini Index, which rates places based on how wealth is distributed. The higher the number, the more unequal the country is. The top 1% in the U.S. is primarily made up of men. Women-dominated fields like teaching and waitressing are lower paying. Women are promoted less often than men. They make 82 cents for every dollar that men make. The top tier is also very white. Minority groups face systemic racism that has contributed to gaps in education, housing, and employment opportunities. African Americans make only 78 cents for every dollar white people make. Inequality varies across the U.S. because of regional economics. Large urban areas like New York City are more unequal because they have low-income residents as well as those in tech, finance, and other industries that offer sky-high wages. Whereas the Great Lakes region is more equal because the wage gap there isn't as wide. Race plays a role too. Southern states, which are generally more racially diverse, tend to be more unequal, while pockets of the West that are more white tend to be more equal. Upward social mobility is especially challenging for those at the very bottom. The rich tend to stay rich, and the poor tend to stay poor. So what could be done? Some legislators have proposed putting the brakes on runaway wealth by raising income taxes on top earners. Many states recently increased the minimum wage, and some states are closing education gaps by expanding access to early learning programs. But on a federal level, there's no consensus, and ultimately, closing the gap between rich and poor will require agreement from an increasingly partisan government, as well as societal shifts to combat sexism and racism. Change isn't around the corner, but understanding how we got here in the first place is a good.
Yeah, so there's some decent coverage there. How we get there is actually, it's not that difficult. I talk about that in my economic policies. Increase minimum wage, shitload. Create a wealth tax. Create a maximum wage. You set the maximum wage to 9 times the lowest paid wage. And then you have the marginal tax rate at 100% at that maximum wage. So with my policies, what, $70,000 minimum wage, or 75, and then the maximum wage is $675,000, although the marginal tax rate at that $675,000 is 100%. So what they take home effectively with that 100% marginal tax rate at $675,000 is about $250,000. So the actual take home difference is about 3 times that of the lowest paid minimum wage person at $70,000. So for me, like if you're making the minimum wage, you don't get taxed at all on the federal level. So you keep everything, and then the higher you go above that, the more taxes you get. You need wealth tax, you need transaction taxes on stock trades and stuff like that. You need and buybacks. You need to add a luxury tax so that things that are significant luxuries have significant taxation. Like someone recommended this, and I really like this concept, is a 100% luxury tax. So if you're going to buy a private jet, you're going to pay double for that. You're going to buy a $10 million, 50-carat diamond or whatever, you're going to pay at least double for that. So that's another way to help significantly stem the level of inequality, not just wealth inequality, but income inequality as well. Universal basic income would be another way to help deal with that. And actually, I use progressive basic income in my policies. And I'm hoping I get someone on here on my stream that can help convince me that not using progressive income like I'm using, and then shifting to what they talk about, just universal basic income, everyone gets it, but you change the tax rates for those up above to compensate for the additional income from UBI, which I'm sure I can be convinced, but I really need to hear the math and look at that. Marty, in my policies, I'm already taxing the shit out of them, the rich people. So another few percent isn't gonna hurt them. Yeah. So those are things that we need to be doing to help deal with that. All right, let's go ahead and read through this. All right. So again, this is time, and I think it's for 2018. I don't know for sure. So take it with a grain of salt as we read this. Like many of the virus's hardest hit victims, the United States went into the COVID-19 pandemic. Okay, so this has been the last few years, at least. Racked with pre-existing conditions. Yep, a fraying public health infrastructure, inadequate medical supplies, and employer-based health insurance system perversely unsuited to the moment. These and other afflictions are surely contributing to the death toll. But in addressing the causes and consequences of this pandemic and its cruelly uneven impact, the elephant in the room is extreme income inequality. Okay, I mean, don't get me wrong. That is, when we talk about it here, pretty much if you want to fix anything, you fix income inequality. That's what I say, right? So yes, that is true. That does take into, when we talk about that within this context, we really need to look at healthcare inequality. So, but even healthcare inequality can't undo the pure sociopathy of those in Congress. Like Biden said he wasn't going to do anything for COVID, and what's his nuts? Trump definitely didn't do anything for COVID, and he disbanded Obama's pandemic response unit, and he played down and even said that COVID is a hoax. Right? I mean, having universal health care is only going to do so much in the face of that stuff. When your policies aren't, like, from the very beginning, doctors said we need to lock down, isolate, wash your hands, and we'll vaccinate once we get it, right? And Trump didn't do that. Biden didn't do that. I mean, universal health care is only going to do much when people aren't protecting themselves or doing their part to make sure that, we're doing what we can to mitigate. Well, that's what he said. I mean, he's the president. He should know, right? It's supposed to be done by April, right? Started in March because the hot weather was going to get rid of it. Ugh. So, yeah. So here, part of this income inequality issue is going to be universal health care. So yes, I've shifted from like Medicare for all, like Bernie Sanders is talking about, going to nationalized healthcare system, not just nationalizing the hospitals, but nationalizing the pharmaceutical industry as well. That's a huge, huge part of this. To nationalize those, and then as a part of that, you can work on the inequality part, much like I talked about a little bit ago. Increase the minimum wage, universal healthcare, universal education, universal access to 4K and that sort of a thing. Housing is a human right, right? Internet as a human right. Basically, looking at universal basic services on top of the income and wealth inequality problem. That's how you deal with that. Now, that will get most of it, but even fixing all of those iniquities won't protect us from the sheer sociopathy of those in charge. So it comes a two-part thing: the iniquities, and then the brain damage of those in charge, the sheer sociopathy of those in charge. Okay, so how big is this elephant? A staggering 50 trillion. This is how much the upward distribution of income has cost American workers over the past several decades. This is not some back-of-the-napkin approximation. According to groundbreaking new working paper by Carter Price, Catherine Edwards of Rand Corporation. Let's see when they published this, so we can see about when this thing the article came out. Give me a date, bitch. Seriously? No date? Okay, this is 2020. Okay, so this article may be 2020, so about 2 years old. That about follows, right? Because it's talking about the pandemic. Okay. Had the more equitable income distributions of the 3 decades following World War II, 1945 to 74, merely held steady. The aggregate annual income of Americans earning below the 90th percentile would have been $2.5 trillion higher in the year 2018 alone. This is an amount equal to nearly 12% of GDP, enough to more than double median income, enough to pay every single working American in the bottom 9 deciles, bottom 90%, an additional $1,100 a month. Every month, every single year. Jesus Christ, that's a lot of money. Prince and Edwards calculate that the cumulative tab for our 4-decade-long experiment in radical inequality had grown to over 47 trillion from 1975 through 2018, at a recent pace of about 2.5 trillion a year. That number we estimate to cross the 50 trillion mark by early 2020. That's 50 trillion that would have gone into paychecks of working Americans had inequality held constant. 50 trillion that would have built a far larger, more prosperous economy. 50 trillion that would have enabled the vast majority of Americans to enter this pandemic far more healthy, resilient, and financially secure. Yep. As the Rand report whose research was funded by the Fair Work Center, which was co-authored by whose co-author David Rolfe is a board member. Okay, where did that? Okay, as the Rand Report and then bracket, whose research was funded by the Fair Work Center, which co-authored David Rolfe is a board member of. There we go. Bracket demonstrates a rising tide most definitely did not lift all boats. It didn't even lift most of them, as nearly all of the benefits of growth these past 45 years was captured by those at the very top. And as the American economy grows, radically unequal is it, and as the American economy grows radically unequal, is holding back economic growth itself. Yeah, and that's exactly true. I'd never considered it from this kind of angle. So if there's high levels of inequality, and the people at the bottom don't have money to spend, that is going to hold economic growth back. So if you actually want to maximize economic growth, you have to maximize equality. Yeah. So that way everyone has the same amount of money, roughly, then everyone has a good amount of money to spend. Instead of those at the top spending a bit and then those at the bottom spending nothing, which would be the majority. Good point. Even inequality is meted out unequally. Low-wage workers and their families, disproportionately people of color, suffer from far higher rates of asthma, hypertension, diabetes, and other COVID-19 comorbidities, yet they are also far less likely to have health insurance and far more likely to work in essential industries with the highest rates of coronavirus exposure and transmission. It is no surprise then, according to the CDC, that COVID-19 inflicts a disproportionate burden of illness and death among racial and ethnic minority groups. But imagine how much safer, healthier, and empowered all American workers might be if that $50 trillion had been paid out in wages instead of being funneled into corporate profits and the offshore accounts of the super rich. Imagine how much richer and more resilient the American people would be. Imagine how many more lives would have been saved had our people been more resilient. Yeah, and that's exactly right, that people of color in this country, because we are systemically and structurally racist, disproportionately are cast into poverty. And a part of that impoverishment is higher levels of less access to healthcare and also higher levels of stress-induced diseases. Alcoholism, addiction, drinking, violence, depression, stress, and all sorts of all that, in addition to the standard Western issues of not biological, the physiological diseases like diabetes and obesity and all that other stuff, and they have less access to healthcare than white people. It is easy to see how such a deadly virus and the draconian measures required to contain it might spark an economic depression. But look straight into the eyes of the elephant in the room, and it is impossible to deny the many ways in which our extreme inequality and exceptionally American affliction has made the virus more deadly and its economic consequences more dire than in any other advanced nation. Why is our death toll so high and our unemployment rate so staggeringly off the charts? Why was our nation so unprepared and our economy so fragile? Why have we lacked the stamina and the will to contain the virus like most other advanced nations? Well, it's because we are the most unequal country in the developed world, and the control and the sociopathy, psychopathy that people in charge have doesn't care about the 90%. The unwashed masses like us are just that. We are our death and suffering is a sacrifice they are willing to make for their profit and their way of life. Opinion on eugenics, abortions, and genderism tools for population cleansing. They can be. I mean, they can be. It just all depends on how you want to use them. Like what's happened in China using, they're suffering from this, right? They use abortions or other forms of control to make sure that they have more boys born. That's highly problematic. Abortions should be freely available, although abortions can be used for eugenics, sure. I mean, anything can be used in a bad way. It's just a matter of how and who. It's hard to keep track of. It's not. It's hard to keep track of, or hard to know, or even interdict ourselves into that process to find why they're getting an abortion. We have to really, the only way you can really combat that is through culture. Make sure your culture isn't racist, isn't genderist, right? It's not sexist or misogynist. You have to make sure that the values of your society values human life, values equity, values all genders and races and all that sort of stuff. And that's why in my policies, the most important part are my 8 philosophical pillars for peace, because that is what it is. That's what it's all about, that we change our values. If we have shitty values like we have in the United States, where inequality is an all-time high, and the rich are willing to sacrifice the 90%, the 99% for profits, I mean, nothing good is going to come of that. That's why in my policies, the most important part of my policies is the first pillar, which is interdependence. All of humanity is interdependent upon the rest of humanity, and all of humanity is interdependent upon the natural world. We are not above and beyond the natural world or the natural cycles. We are an integral part of it. And as a cultural value, a societal value, we need to value each and every human. Harm to one human, meaning through inequality or poverty or racism or sexism, is a harm to all of us, because that one person. Like, I have this large post I'm writing, and I'm talking about the 6 degrees of connectivity, kind of the opposite of 6 degrees of separation from Kevin Bacon, right? Kind of showing how everyone is connected. Like in 2008, Microsoft did this when this was a big rage, 6 degrees of separation from Kevin Bacon, that everyone on their Hotmail platform was connected by, I don't know, was it 6.5? 6.5 or 7 point, something like that. It was almost 6 degrees of separation between every single person on the Hotmail platform, right? So just like, when someone is suffering somewhere, that could get back to every other person in the world, even all across the world, because especially with as connected we are as a society. Like right now, I'm streaming, right? I'm streaming on Twitter, Facebook, and Twitch. And I have a lot of people from Europe who come to this channel. Well, when I have people, and a lot of people from America. I mean, I can touch all those people, and those people, when they are going through their day online, can affect other people online and all throughout the world too. Yes. So abortion, if you wanted, and other things like that, eugenics, if you want that to not be a problem, by and large, you have to change your cultural values to such a way that that will not be a problem. Does that answer your question? Time. Yeah, I do have abortion as a human right. I think that's in here. Yeah, I do. I don't state it explicitly in here. Declaration of the Unified Rights of Humanity, but I do say something to the effect of nothing should stand between a doctor and, the patient. Kind of pointing to the abortion issue. But I do say on the healthcare policies that abortion is a human right. Let's go check and make sure. A lot of times I'll talk about it, but it never actually gets in here. Ah, loud. God. Yeah. Do I say it's a human right? I don't say it's a human right. I say family planning is a human right. But abortion is a part of that. You say something not to be legislated, it is between a woman and her partners and her doctor. Which even the partners aspect, I'm thinking of yanking out of there too. So if you have a case for that, please throw it at me so I can evaluate this. I'll throw that in here too so you can take a look. if you get that bored. Okay. Of course, America's chronic case of extreme inequality is old news. Many other studies have documented this trend, chronicled its impact, and analyzed its causes. But where others have painted the picture in terms of aggregate shares of GDP, productivity growth, or other cold, hard statistics, the RAND report brings the inequality price tag directly home by denominating it in dollars, not just the aggregate 50 trillion figure, but in granular demographic detail. You're right. You're right. It's not. It's not. It may be saving the woman's life as well. You're right. It isn't. It isn't. Okay. Let's see what else I say here. Human right. So I say healthcare is a human right. Do I say? Is that the only place I talk about it? That is the only place I talk about it. Medical procedure for women's health. True. True statement. True statement. Is what I have here okay? I mean, maybe where I have it is problematic. Maybe I need to move it up to a more general section. So abortion is not something to be legislated. It is between the woman, her partners, and her doctor. And the other thing, like I said, I'm looking at possibly taking out her partners from here and just making it between a woman and her doctor, which I think is probably the better thing to do. So put this. Probably expanded benefits. This medicine, yeah, so I probably have to put it up here. Yes, probably have to put it up here under expanded benefits. So you need to keep it out of the family planning aspect and then move it up here under expanded benefits. Or maybe put it as its own entry here. Yeah, I'll have to think about that. I think I'm going to have to move it up here and out of the family planning section. You're right about that. And I think I have to move her partners too. What are you? Yeah, I'm going to have to do that. Let me copy this. Up and remove. Any medical profession have a code of ethics, so there are not any frivolous. Okay, that's true. That's true. That's fair enough. Yeah, as long as they keep to their what's it called? Their yeah, the code of ethics. Yeah, I think you're right. That should be okay then. Yeah, fair. Fair. Okay. Oh, thank you so much for the follow, Pablo Cadiz. Thank you. Glad you found something of value here. I'm freezing on. I cover the 3 C's: capitalism, climate change, and coronavirus. Although I haven't done so much of coronavirus. Right now we're doing some stuff, reading an article on inequality in healthcare. Or inequality, reading an article on inequality in America. All right, so, but in granular detail. For example, are you a typical black man earning $35,000 a year? You're being paid at least $26,000 a year less than you would have had in income distributions then you would have had income distributions held constant. Are you a college-educated, prime-aged, full-time worker earning $72,000, depending on the inflation used, PCE or CPI, respectively? Rising inequality is costing you between $40,000 and $63,000 a year. But whatever your race, gender, education, attainment, urbanicity, or income, the data show, if you earn below the 90th percentile, the relentless with the relentlessly upward redistribution of income since 1975 is coming out of your pocket. As Princeton Edwards explained, from 1947 through 1974, real incomes grew close to the rate of per capita economic growth across all income levels. That means that for 3 decades, those at the bottom and middle of the distribution saw their incomes grow at about the same rate as those at the top. This was the era in which America built the world's largest and most prosperous middle class, an era in which inequality between income groups steadily shrank, even as shocking inequalities between the sexes and races largely remained. And a lot of this is because of the marginal tax rate, especially from what World War II on 19 whatever was like 90, was it 94%, 91%, 94% or something like that. But around 1975, this extraordinary era of broadly shaped prosperity came to an end. Since then, the wealthiest Americans, particularly those in the top 1% and the 0.1%, have managed to capture an ever larger share of our nation's economic growth. In fact, almost all of it. The real income skyrocketing as the vast majority of Americans saw little, if any, gains. I don't have any of these here. Ghost Hack. They got really high quality sound. Thought about picking this one up, but anyhow, what if American prosperity had continued to be broadly shared? How much more would a typical worker be earning today? Once the data are compiled, answering these questions is fairly straightforward. Princeton Edwards look at real taxable income from 1975 to 2018. Then they compared the actual income distributions in 2018 to a counterfactual that assumes incomes had continued to keep pace with growth in per capita gross domestic product. 118% increase over the 1975 income numbers, whether measuring inflation using more conservative personal consumptive whether measuring inflation using the more conservative personal consumption expenditures price index, PCE, or the more commonly cited consumer price index for all urban consumers, CPI-URS, the results are striking. Income distributions for all adults, bottom, what is this showing? Okay, top 1%. Is this how much income? Income distribution for all adults. Okay. This must be how much they're going to be making. 1975, 252 for the top 1%, 1.16 million. Counterfactual, what does that mean? So is that, okay, so that must be what they would be making in today's numbers. So 1975, the amount per hour that you were in 2008. Oh, wow. Well, depending on what you're making, that might be okay, but most likely not. Yeah, well, working at my county job, I was making about 60 a year. And I didn't get regular increases. But I was doing quite okay. Now I'm making quite a bit more than that in my current job. I've actually almost increased my income. Well, 90,000 is what I'm making currently, which is, I'm not complaining. But, I've been in a position of privilege, white, male, 25 plus change. Okay, 25 is all right. Yeah, the minimum wage should be somewhere near 35,000, $30 to $35 an hour. Even with 25, per hour. But that's what you're making, 25 per hour. Yeah, okay, that's pretty decent, but it still needs to be more, especially with healthcare and education and inflation, especially nowadays, with the insanity of crisis profiteering from the corporations. Yeah, it was easily looking at $35 an hour is what people should be making, which is probably right around $80,000 a year. Yeah, I'm barely above what I say my minimum wage should be. Income can go a long way if you know how to budget and not buy frivolous things. Yeah, of course. But you can't budget your way out of poverty. without severe harm of severe harm to your life. It was then, but now it's not okay. Oh, you're in San Francisco. Ooh, yeah, that's horribly expensive there. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's probably need at least double that just to really fit in okay, like $50 an hour for, any of those Bay areas where all the tech and movies and shit are. Yikes. Yikes. Yeah, it's not cool. Not good at all. So here it's it's like 75% increase, right? No, here it's almost over double. 9,000 to 20,000 is what they should be making. And in the bottom 75, I got offered a good paying job in the Bay Area, but the income did not justify the cost of living. If you can commute or work like remotely, that can be okay. But yeah, actually living there, I'm also very fortunate too. The position I'm in, I'm working remote, which they're based out of Utah. I'm working for a university, Western Governors University, and I'm commuting. I'm working through, not commuting. I'm remote, and I'm working in a small. I'm living in a small rural town, so the money I'm making will go a long way here. It would be a lot different if I was actually living there, because Salt Lake City is it's expensive too, but I can't imagine it's even close to as expensive as it is in San Francisco. Did you get another job that did better for you somewhere else? Nice. I could have worked there back in 2017. So remote jobs were not very common back then. Yeah. The boss is demanding people come back to the office at least a few days a week. Yeah, that's too bad. That's all that matters within capitalism is money. You have to make profit for them regardless of the cost to you. You can die. That is a sacrifice they're willing to make as long as they make their money, right? That's all that matters within capitalism. Making the rich richer regardless of the cost. I'm sorry to hear that, Girly Bear. Really. I think with Western Governors University, I think most of them are. Well, no, there's some people who are actually going into the office, but a lot of them are very much remote. I don't know what the percentage is, but I can imagine that most of us are working remote. I actually stayed in my current town, Tucson, and I make okay money. Okay, good for you. I'm glad to hear you're doing okay. Yeah. Good to hear. All right. At every income level up to the 90th percentile, wage earners are now being paid a fraction of what they would have had inequality held constant. For example, at the median individual income of $36,000, workers are being shortchanged about $21,000 a year. $28,000 when using CPI, an amount equivalent to an additional $10 to $13 an hour. Hello, Ukraine flag. All right. Now, I don't. I support the people of Ukraine, but not the government, because the government of Ukraine is, well, it's not good. It's a U.S. proxy. We've got people here in our area who are from Ukraine, and we've done quite a few donation classes because we own a yoga studio, and done some. One of our instructors is from the Ukraine, so she knows people from the Ukraine, obviously. So we've sent a whole bunch of money to people from Ukraine that she knows to help support them, in dealing with the horrors of what's happening there, and it's all because of the United States. United States, who is responsible for the horrors in the Ukraine. As you watched at the very beginning of the stream, there's several small clips from Claire Daly, Mick Wallace from the UN, talking about the US and the US military and genocide that the West is supporting and stuff like that, especially in Ukraine as well. Not good. All right, but according to Price and Edwards, this actually understates the impact of rising inequality on low and middle income workers because much of the gains at the bottom of the distribution were largely driven by an increase in hours, not an increase in wages. To adjust for this, along with changing patterns of workforce participation, the researchers repeat their analysis for full-year, full-time prime-age workers. Ukraine was listed as one of the most corrupt nations among those. Right. Ooh, right, and that is because of the U.S. invasion. Or not the invasion, the U.S.'s coup in 2014. I think that's where it really started in 2014, when the U.S. overthrew the elected government and installed a right-wing asshole in there. At least that's what I've read. These results are even more stark, unlike the growth patterns in the 1950s and 60s, writes Price and Edwards. The majority of full-time workers did not share in economic growth of the last 40 years. Holy shit. So from 75, the bottom is making 28,000, they should be making 61,000. 75th percentile making 58,000, they should be making 126,000. Jesus, that's almost 3 times as much. Yeah, people are missing a lot of money. On average, extreme inequality is costing the median income full-time worker about $42,000 a year. Adjusted for inflation using the CPI, the numbers are even worse. Half of all full-time workers, those at or below the median income of $50,000 a year, now earn less than half of what they would have had. Half of what they would have had incomes across the distribution continue to keep pace. Half of what they would have had incomes across the distribution continued to keep pace with economic growth. There we go. And that's per worker, not per household. At both the 25th and 50th percentiles, households comprised of married couples with one full-time worker earned thousands of dollars less in 2018 dollars than a comparable household in 1975, and $50,000 and $66,000 less respectively than if inequality had held constant, a predicament compounded by the rising cost of maintaining a dignified middle-class life. According to Oren Cass, executive director of the conservative think tank American Compass, the median male worker needed 30 weeks of income in 1985 to pay for housing, healthcare, transportation, and education for his family. By 2018, that cost of thriving index had increased to 53 weeks. Oh my God. More weeks than in an actual year. But the counterfactual reveals an even starker picture. In 2018, the combined income of married households with 2 full-time workers was barely more than what the income of a single earner household would have earned had inequality held constant. 2-income families are now working twice the hours to maintain a shrinking share of the pie while struggling to pay housing, healthcare, education, childcare, and transportation costs that have grown at 2 to 3 times the rate of inflation. Yeah, that's insane. Insane in the membrane. I wonder why it starts in 75, because I think not Nixon, I have not. Have you read the book Capital in the 21st Century? I have it. I bought it when it came out, but I haven't. It's such a fucking thick ass book, right? That's the Thomas Piketty book. It was so dry, but it does offer a good glimpse. Yeah. So I think it's the Thomas Piketty one, right? So I have it, but I haven't read it yet. I've got like 5 years worth of books on my Kindle, on my phone, on the Kindle app to read. And normally for my birthday, I'll take a week off and I'll read. And my birthday's coming up here in the middle of November, and that's what I'll be doing. Piketty, okay, good. Yeah, that will take a lot for me to get through, because it's like 1,000 pages or some shit like that. It's giant. And for me too. Yeah, I started reading it a little bit, and yeah, it was really dry. I'm gonna need a lot of time off to be brave enough to tackle that book. because it is so it's so thick and dry. Yikes. Maybe someday when I win the lottery, I can sit down and take the several weeks to read that. And to have enough alcohol to get my way through it. Yeah. This dramatic redistribution of income. Oh, and if you're looking for books to read, in my introduction, I've got the books you need to read. That's there's 5 books there. 75 wasn't after that somewhere. Could be. Yeah, I was thinking Carter was like the middle of the 70s, and then wasn't it Nixon? Because Nixon, in 71 was Nixon, because that's when we shifted off the fiat currency. Okay, let's see. Was Nixon president? 69 to 74. Okay. And Grizzly Bear says, okay, yep. Okay, so Nixon is 70. Okay, let's Carter. You know what? Start date is 77. Okay, 77 to 81. So we held 1 term. There we go. So Nixon until 77, then Carter till 81. Right? Or then Carter. Nixon, 74. Okay. Nixon, Ford, then Carter. Okay. 74. Okay. All right. That makes sense. All right. There we go. So 74 to 77 was Ford. And so this is at the beginning of Carter's administration in 75. Then you said the gas shortage. Portage in the 70s. What caused 70s? Oh, it's the oil embargo, right? 73. Okay, dates. So summer of 73. Doesn't tell us what the dates are. So 73 at least. Okay. Okay, so 73, oil embargo, 75. So this is during first year of Nixon. The OPEC embargo, okay. The U.S., okay. Gas shortage, okay. So 73, 74. Yeah, that definitely would have affected things. You went into 74? Okay, so about a year. Okay. Yeah, so that definitely would have increased inflation significantly during that time. You weren't alive back then? In 74, I was 1. I was born in November of 73. Back in the day. Okay, so the higher your income, the larger your percentage gains. As a result, the top 1%'s share of total taxable income has more than doubled from 9% in 75 to 22% in 2018. While the bottom 90% have seen their income share fall from 67% to 50%. This represents a direct transfer of income and, over time, wealth from the vast majority of working Americans to a handful at the very top. You were 10? Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, it's... When Republicans get into power, inequality rises. Not that Democrats are good on this. They're not. Because, Obama oversaw one of the largest transfers of wealth to the 1% in American history with the bailout, if I remember correctly. I was born in 88. My wife was born in '82, so she's a bit older than you are. Cool. So young, so young. Uh, the distribution of taxable income for 1975 to 2018. Okay, so bottom 90%. Okay, so top 1% took 9% in 75, and in 2018 they took 22%. Someone was born in 88. And then the bottom 90% got 67% of the income, and then in 2018 they took 50%. Okay. But given the changing demographic composition of the US workforce, these top line numbers can only tell part of the story. The US workforce is now better educated and more urban than it was in 75. It is also far less white and male, with white men falling from over 60% of the prime age workforce in 74 to less than 45% by 2018. Oh, these changes are important because while there was far more equality between the income distributions in 75, there's also more inequality with them, notably in regard to gender and race, of course. Of course. Millennial life, yeah. For example, in 1975, the median income of white women was only 31% of that of white men. By 2018, white women were earning 68% as much. So a double gain. Likewise, the median income of black men as a share of their white counterparts' earning rose from 74% in 75 to 80% in 2018. Jesus. Women made more strides than people of color. What did it say? Black people. Although they had much more to make up. Clearly, income disparities between races, especially between men and women, have narrowed since 75, and that is a good thing. But unfortunately, much of the narrowing we see is more an artifact of 4 decades of flat or declining wages for low and middle income white men than it is of substantial gains for women and non-whites. Oh, wages falling comparatively because of inflation and minimum wages not rising. The median income for adults with positive earnings by gender and race. Oh God, okay. So all groups, the loss of 10,000, at least between the straight amounts, but a loss of actual $57,000 of income. All right, so white men. Okay, so white men, white women at 75, half, black men, third, black women less than half, about the same as white women, okay. Other men, not too much less. Okay, so 2018, what have we got here? Women are why is my thing disconnected? That's fine. I don't need to hear anything. I'll just turn it off. Okay. The black men, not quite 10,000. Women doubled. Women doubled again. Third increase over here. So how much have we actually lost in 83,000 for white men, other men 70, women is 30,000, black men 60,000. Yikes. It's horrific. And the amount of actual damage this causes, psychological damage, the biopsychosocial effects of inequality and poverty is devastating to these communities. And poverty has been proven as a comorbidity for many things. Depression, suicide, violence, as well as other physiological diseases. Much has been made about white male grievance in the age of Trump, and given their falling or stagnant real incomes, one can understand why some white men might feel aggrieved. White, non-urban, non-college educated men have the slowest wage growth in every demographic category, of course. But to blame their woes on competition from women or minorities would be to completely miss the target. In fact, white men still earn more than white women at all income distributions and substantially more than most non-white men and women. Only Asian American men earn higher, yet there is no moral or practical justification for the persistence of any income disparity based on race or gender. True statement. The counterfactuals in the table above appear vastly unequal because they extrapolate from the indefensible 1975 levels of race and gender inequality. They assume that inequality remained constant between both income distributions and within them, that women and non-whites had not narrowed the income gap with white men. But surely this cannot be our goal. In an economy freed from race and gender bias and that shares the fruits of growth broadly across all income distributions, the most appropriate counterfactual for all the groups in this table would be the aggregate counterfactual for all groups. A median income of $57,000 per year for all adults with positive earnings, $92,000 for full-time prime-age workers. That would be the income for all workers at the 50th percentile. Wow, $92,000 for those in the middle per year. That's insane. Regardless of race or gender, had race and gender inequality within distributions been eliminated and inequality between distributions not grown. By this measure, we can see that in real dollars, women and non-whites have actually lost more income to rising inequality than white men because starting from their disadvantaged positions in 75, they had far more to potentially gain. Per capita GDP grew by 118% over the following 4 decades, so there's plenty of new income to spread around. That the majority of white men have benefited from almost none of this growth isn't because they have lost income to women or minorities, it's because they've lost it to their largely white male counterparts in the top 1% who have captured nearly all the income growth for themselves. Right. And I think the video we saw today talked about that too, that the top 1% is mostly white and mostly male, right? And the top 1% has taken the majority of the wealth and the income. According to economist Thomas Piketty, men accounted for 85% of the top income centile, top 10%, in the mid-2010s. And while he doesn't specify, these men are overwhelmingly white. This is a nice long article. Thus, by far, the single largest driver of rising inequality these past 40 years has been the dramatic rise in inequality between white men. Okay. The data, back over here. Make billionaires pay. Okay. The data on income distribution by educational attainment is equally revealing in that it calls the lie on the notion of a skills gap, a dominant narrative that has argued that rising inequality is largely a consequence of a majority of American workers failing to acquire these higher skills necessary to compete in our modern global economy. If workers were better educated, this narrative argues they would earn more money. Well, that is definitely part of it, right? We don't have universal health care. We don't have universal education. That makes every person in this country not every person. Yeah, that makes every person in the country less able to compete in the global economy, especially versus countries which have that. It's very difficult for anyone in America to compete against someone in one of the Nordic countries. Universal health care, education, all that stuff, right? And high levels of equality. But what we find is when there's high levels of equality, it means everything is better. So here we have high levels of inequality. You want to make everything better, like I say here, you destroy inequality. That's what my policies all do. It's not just an education gap, right? It's a much larger conversation of equality on a societal level. Not just education, healthcare, quality of living, and all that other stuff too. All right. Indeed, at every income distribution, the education premium has increased since 1975, with the income of college graduates rising faster than their less educated counterparts. This growing gap is more consequence of falling incomes for workers without a college degree than it is of real incomes for most workers with one. For not only have workers without a degree secured none of the gains for decades of economic growth below the 50th percentile, they've actually seen the real incomes decline. Right, because the inequality, part of the equality we've seen is those who don't have college education take minimum wage jobs. The minimum wage hasn't gone up in a very, very long time. So that's a large part of this too. And not having universal healthcare, not having universal education is a part of that as well. Had we had those things, had the equality in our country been significantly lower, and they had access to those things, this would be a very different conversation, as well as minimum wage going up. The median real income for full-time workers with a 4-year degree has grown from $55,000 a year in 1975 to $72,000 in 2018. But that still falls short of the $120,000 they'd be earning had incomes grown with per capita GDP. Even at the 90th percentile, a college-educated full-time worker making $191,000 a year is earning less than 78% what they would have had inequality held constant. The reality is that American workers have never been more highly educated. In 1975, only 67% of the adult U.S. workforce had a high school education or better, while just 15% had earned a 4-year college degree. Wow, that's sad. By 2018, and even in the 70s, they had a much easier time to afford college, right? Because once minimum wage started, you were able to afford, like in the 70s, work full-time, afford a family, afford a house, and to send, go to school. By 2018, 91% of adult workers had completed high school. Wow, that's huge. While the percentage of college graduates in the workforce had doubled to 34%. In raw numbers, the population of adult workers with a high school education or less has fallen since 1975, while the number of workers with a 4-year degree has more than quadrupled. Well, it's 15%, 34%. That just doubled. Okay. Number of adults with income in millions by level of education. Okay, so 44 million with less. Okay, what? I was minding my own business, working my little payroll processor job then. The tech companies overtook the Bay Area. And it's been nothing but getting financially choked since then. Oh, okay. Yeah, once the tech companies roll in with their big money and their big incomes, they can pretty much determine most of the local politics. Yeah, that's too bad. What is this saying? Number of adults with income by education level. I'm not sure what this is saying. Number of adults in millions with income? Number of adults with income in millions. Okay, so less than high school, this is how much they're making. Okay. So overall, so people with less than high school are earning 50% less than 75. Those with high school are making 34% more. Those with some college are making two times as much, and those with college are making 3 times as much. as they were in 75. That's what it looks like here. Okay, it's impossible to argue that a skills gap is responsible for rising income inequality when the rate of educational attainment is rising faster than the rate of growth in productivity or per capita GDP. Well, there's also a racial component to this. I mean, obviously, because of poverty, people of color have a much harder time of gaining access to this. So yes, they're pretty much white people will have more access to education, specifically white males will have access to it. Yes, workers with college degrees are doing better than those without. The economy we've built over the past 5 years has been more unequal to some than others. But below the 90th percentile, even college graduates are falling victim to decades-long trend of radical inequality that is robbing them of most of the benefits of economic growth. The iron rule of market economies is that we all do better when we all do better. When workers have more money, businesses have more customers and hire more workers. Yeah, that's exactly right. That's why minimum wage increases do so well for the local economies and why UBI and stuff like that will do much better for every single nation than giving money to the rich, because the rich just save it and invest it and make a bunch of money off it, while the rest of us unwashed masses, us peasants, get poorer and poorer. Okay, let's see. 70% of our economy is dependent on consumer spending. The faster and broader retail income grow, the stronger the demand for products and services American businesses produce. American businesses. Most of our stuff is sent overseas, right? I mean, the local service industry, sure, that's obviously local, but manufacturing, stuff like that is sent overseas. Thanks, Obama. This is the virtuous cycle through which workers and businesses prospered together in the decades immediately following World War II. But as wages stagnated after 1975, so too did consumer demand. And as demand slowed, so did the economy. The 2014 report from the OECD estimated that rising income inequality knocked as much as 9 points off US GDP growth over the previous 2 decades. A deficit that has surely grown over the past 6 years. Okay, so 2014. So this was written in 2020. The article is about 2 years old. Deficit that has surely grown over the past 6 years as inequality continued to decline. That's about $2 trillion worth of GDP that's being frittered away year after year through policy choices that intentionally constrain the earning power of American workers. Oh, Scatterbox, thank you so much for the follow. I appreciate that. Glad you found something of value. I currently am only live streaming on Saturdays from 2 to 5 Central, so we have about a half an hour left for today. If you want to read more of my stuff, my blog is there. My policies are there too. You can follow me on Twitter and Facebook and all other places. You can check down in the About section for all those links. Man, COVID-19 may have triggered our current crisis, but it wasn't its only cause, for even had our political leaders done everything right, in the moment, our response to the pandemic would still have been mired in the footprint of extreme inequality. Okay, true. A $50 trillion upward redistribution of wealth and income, $297,000 per household, that has left our families, our economy, and our democracy far less capable of fighting this virus than in any other advanced nations. This is the America that stumbled into the COVID-19 pandemic and the economic catastrophe it unleashed. In America with an economy 2 trillion smaller and a workforce 2.5 trillion a year poorer than the otherwise would be had inequality held constant since 1995. I was meaning to follow earlier. I have checked out your stream from. Oh, okay. All right, cool. Yeah. 2 Central. Yeah, it would be great. Yay! Yeah, my channel is Pure Doomer. We're not going to get any real good news on my channel, so just be prepared for that. I'm 100% Doomer. Okay. Okay, this is in America in which 47% of renters are cost burdened. in which 40% of households can't cover a $400 emergency expense, in which half of Americans over age 55 have no retirement savings at all. This is an America in which 20 million have no health insurance, and in which 44 million underinsured Americans can't afford the deductible or copays to use the insurance they have. Me too? Yeah. Yeah. Did I convert you to full doomer, or were you already there before you came here? or did I cement you into that? Yeah, I'm kind of like I'm full doomer, but I'm also saying how we can fix it, right? My policies are all about, okay, we're fucked up, human extinction in 200 years, but if you want to fix it, here are my policies. This is how we do it, and this is how, how aggressive we have to be at doing it. Gutting the military by 75%, shifting to sustainable energy, vertical farming, reparations to the global south, so on and so forth. You was there already? Okay. All right, so you found your tribe here. That's good. We're glad to have you, Girly Bear. Thank you so much. As doomers can stick together and watch the train wreck in slow motion. Okay. This is an America that recklessly rushed to reopen its economy in the midst of a deadly pandemic because businesses were too fragile to survive extended closure and workers too powerless and impoverished to defy the call back to work. Right, that's exactly right. And much as I already talk about with this pandemic, with COVID-19, now that businesses have seen how much of a weak link that having actual employees is, there's going to be a much larger rush to automate as much as possible so they get rid of as many workers as possible so that they can get rid of that weak link. I mean, we covered a few weeks ago, the Amazon article talking about the robot automation for picking stuff out of their stuff for their warehouses. I mean, the hope I have is Lula wins in Brazil. Okay. Yeah, I'm hoping for that too. Hopefully that will be good news. But it's hard to know with all the corruption and the U.S. working against it and all that sort of stuff. So we'll see. Hopefully good news. So yeah, what's going to happen once Amazon automates their warehouses, and then Amazon starts selling those bots to other businesses if they want to, and get rid of as many factory jobs as possible, greatly increasing the level of poverty and unemployed masses. And there's a bot that will cook food, a chef bot. And what's going to happen once Tesla and other companies working on autonomous driving, what's going to happen then? What's going to happen to the cab drivers? What's going to happen to truck drivers? They're going to lose their jobs. How is that going to radically change the economy and poverty in this country and globally? Just going to get worse. Humans are the weakest link in profit, at least on the bottom half. Okay, there are some who blame the current plight of American workers on structural changes in the underlying economy, on automation, yep, and especially in globalization, yep. According to this popular narrative, the lower wages of the past 40 years were the unfortunate but necessary price of keeping American businesses competitive. Incorrect. In an increasingly cutthroat global market. But in fact, the $50 trillion transfer of wealth the RAND report documents has occurred entirely within the American economy, not between it and its trading partners. No, this upward redistribution of income, wealth, and power wasn't inevitable. It was a choice, a direct result of trickle-down policies we chose to implement since 1975. Okay. I was a little bit skeptical about this article because it's from Time, massive corporate, but this has been pretty good. Yes, trickle-down economics. Giving more to the rich doesn't solve our problems. As I said earlier, giving the money to the unwashed masses like us is the only way to really stimulate the economy. All right, we chose to cut taxes on billionaires and to deregulate the financial industry. Yep. We chose to allow CEOs to manipulate share prices through stock buybacks. Yep, my policies deal with all that. And to lavishly reward themselves with the proceeds. We choose to permit giant corporations through mergers and acquisitions to accumulate the vast monopoly power necessary to dictate both prices charged and wages paid. We chose to erode the minimum wage and the overtime threshold and the bargaining power of labor. Yep, for 4 decades we chose elected political leaders who put material interests of the rich and powerful above those of the American people. Well, now they're technically correct in that, right? That we voted for the people in power, the presidents, of course, but the larger issue here is that our parties are bought and paid for by the corporations and the rich. I mean, the people, the 99%, us, we don't have any representation in government. So it's, I mean, yes, we voted for them, but we didn't choose them. The 1% chose the nominees, right? Like they got rid of Bernie Sanders. Even Obama came out of retirement to get rid of Bernie so that they could get their corporate whore into office, right? Both Biden and both fucking Hillary, right? People didn't really choose those. If people actually had choice in these things, very few right-wingers would exist. We'd have more people like these guys in office, right? Mick Wallace and Claire Daly, right? If the people actually had a voice, this is who would be in office. We actually had a say in the electoral process. That is who we would choose. That's who many of us would choose, at least. But it's any actual leftists, like the Squad is a prime example of that, right? They actually ran under the Justice Democrats, ran fairly grassroots movements, and they got elected in, but now they've joined the board. They're now a part of the Democratic Party and voting as a Democrat, not voting for the people. So, much as my policies look at solving this problem, and actually, let me go ahead and let's check our electoral reform policies, because I could talk about that in here. It's like democracy can't exist. What do I say? Okay, never been a democracy, blah, 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 blah. Okay, I can kind of start with this, I suppose. So I added this to my policies this year, actually, a few months ago. No, 4 or 5 months ago, I think. So this is something, I've talked about this on my stream, but I didn't put it in my policies, but this is important to understand. First thing you need to understand is that the United States has never been a democracy. And I'm not even talking about the pedantic fact of America being a, quote, republic, a constitutional republic. From America's very inception, not only had the right to vote, at first it was just, well, what did it do? From America's very inception, not everyone had the right to vote. Not everyone had their voice heard. At first, it was just landowning white males, which is barely 6% of the colonial population. Many people fought and died over many years for your right to vote, especially women and minorities, and this battle is still not over today. Non-white men and freed male slaves are guaranteed the right to vote in 1870, so that is 100 years, basically just white males being able to vote. Women didn't get the right to vote until 1920. That's 70, that's over, I can't do math, 1700, it's over like 150 years. Native Americans, another 150 years, right? Chinese immigrants, 170 years, something like that. Minorities, and especially African Americans, had the right to vote protected in some southern states by the Voting Rights Act of '65, but which was recently gutted by the Supreme Court in 2013. Pretty much the day following that disastrous decision, quite a few states passed voter suppression laws, which are still keeping people from casting their vote. Even today, minorities, there really isn't a democracy the rich people own the electoral process. They have the money and the resources to disproportionately affect policy and affect people. They have to take economic classes based on Chicago school. Okay, too dumb to know if they're being fed. Yeah, and that's the so economics is a problem because it's a self-referential cult that is there to ensure that those who learn it will protect capitalism and monetary system. Yeah, well, it's also that's how we're taught. That's how the news talks about it, right? That's how newspapers talk about it. I mean, they reinforce economics and that sort of a thing. So it's really hard to break free of that, of the propaganda, of the capitalist propaganda that economics and economists provide, right? You really have to dig deep and start asking questions that matter to really break the brainwashing that we all have from the media and from our educational institutions, right? It takes a special person to ask the questions that matter to break free of that. So it's very, very difficult. Very difficult to find people that have done that already. Like people who come here, they're typically people who have already broken free of that, but it's very hard to do. I mean, if you guys want a book to read on that, there's one of the books in the books you need to read is the Donut Economics book. She really talks about the problems with contemporary economics. This is such a great book. I changed my policies based off some of the things that she wrote. It's such a great book. If you want to learn more, here's a video about her donut economics and her book and stuff like that. Really read it. It's a great book. It's one of my 5 books you need to read. So you can check that out. All right. So yes, we chose the political leaders, but we didn't get to choose the nominees because the 1% and the corporations get to pick the nominees. Very important. Other nations are suffering less from COVID-19 because they made better choices, and the good news is that America can too. Economics is a choice. We can choose to raise the federal minimum wage $15 an hour or $20 an hour and peg it to productivity growth like in the decades before 75. Okay, yeah, that's I mean, it needs to be at least $30 an hour. If we're not starting at least $30 an hour, you're fucking everybody over. But pegging it to growth or CPI or something like that is exactly what needs to be done instead of having to raise it every year or whenever it expires, which is fucking bullshit. A good start. We could choose to revalue work so that a majority of Americans once again earn time and a half pay for every hour worked in 40 hours. Sure. Well, for me, I changed full-time work at least down to 32 hours. So I do 4-day work week. Then actually, I'll open this up. I change it based off age. So the older you are, the less you work for full-time pay. There we go. So I used to read Chicago School of Economics and other neoclassical versions. I have since been more Keynesian. Okay. Check out oh, actually, let me put this in here. Oh, come back here. Okay, so I'll get back to that in just a second. So if you want to read a book, read I have honorable mention in here, I think, right? There's 2 books down here. Yeah, some more light reading. So here, The Deficit Myth by Stephanie Kelton. Great book. I've read this. I've very much gotten into MMT, modern monetary theory. And I actually have a post on that, not a post, a page on this. If you want to learn more about MMT and that sort of thing, it's here. It's not 100% done. I have a lot more reading to do, but this will get you the basics of it. MMT is, I think, considered, another name for it is post-Keynesian, I think. Really, check it out. Once you understand this, everything within economics and spending changes. Post. Yes, post-Keynesian economics, heterodox economics, Neo-Chartel economics. Okay, give it a read. Good book. Oh yeah, so I was going here. So yeah, I said full time at 32 hours, and then every decade it reduces the number of hours you need to work by 1 day to get full time work. But I do say retirement should be age 50. Don't know. National tracking and benefits, that's something that needs to be done. Because like I worked at a county government for 20 years, 19 years technically. And I had like 2 months of vacation. And now I'm working at my new position. I've got I'll earn maybe 2 weeks a year to start. Lost a lot that I've built up. So we should have national tracking of hours worked, benefits, and that sort of thing. Yeah, retirement age should be 50 years of age. Yep. There you go. Yes, time and a half is good. We could choose to provide affordable, high-quality healthcare, education to all Americans. Yep. Nationalize it all, while modernizing our social insurance and retirement systems so that contract and gig workers aren't left out and left behind. Yep. We could choose to make it easier for workers to organize and to defend the rights and interests of those who can't. We could choose to build more equitable, resilient, and prosperous America, an America that grows its economy by intentionally including every American in it. But given our nation's radical redistribution of wealth and power these past 40 years, it won't be easy. Yeah. And so another thing I say, my policies is, nope, and this is important social. No union. Union. Okay, so here we go. So I say all businesses, I don't know. I don't know what the number would be here. Like 25 employees or more should be automatically unionized. That should be the default for all workplaces. And then beyond that, you should be looking at co-ops and employee-owned businesses. And that should be, the state, local, federal government should be throwing tax benefits to those businesses that are employee-owned or co-ops. And maybe nothing to those, no benefit to those who are unionized. And then for those businesses who have 25 or more or whatever that number is, and they're not unionized or co-op or employee owned, should get increased taxes on them. And also not get access to like state, local, federal contracts and that sort of a thing. That's kind of getting into the economies for the common good method of setting a policy. Yeah, so there. That'll help deal with some of that. That it? Oh, there's more. This is long, but good. What American workers need are multiple simultaneous experiments in rebuilding worker power, from tweaking existing labor laws to sectoral bargaining to the creation of whole new trade associations and broad-based not-for-profit organizations. So the issue for not-for-profit organizations is they end up being just as bad as the for-profit organizations. There isn't enough ensuring that they're doing good things as a part of watching over these nonprofit organizations. For example, imagine an AARP for all working Americans, relentlessly dedicated to both raising wages and reducing costs of thriving, a mass membership organization so large and so powerful that our political leaders won't dare to look the other way. Only then, by matching power with power, can we clear a path to enacting the laws and policies necessary to ensure that trickle-down economics never threatens our health, safety, and welfare again. Okay, so yes. So I'm talking about this. This is actually a very good thing. What I talk about is that we don't need a new party. We don't need a third party. I mean, at this point, we don't really need more than two parties. What we really need is an umbrella organization to bring all leftist organizations together, working together, so that we can, much like we're talking about here, work towards making the changes that need to be done. I mean, there's so many leftist organizations that are competing against each other and aren't working together. We don't need the People's Party. We don't need the Forward Party. We need an umbrella organization to connect all of these parties, all these organizations, all together so that we can work together instead of competing to make all this stuff happen. More. There's little evidence that the current... Okay, so now the question is Now, they say all these things here, which this is turns out to be a pretty decent article. How much do they hold truth to power in doing that? How much are they saying Bernie Sanders? How much, when AOC was running, how much are they saying that? How much are they saying all these things during election time? And all these media will, for the most part, will put out something like this to throw the people a bone, but they won't actually, when it comes time for elections, hold them accountable for this sort of a thing. There's no evidence that the current administration has any interest in dealing with the crisis. Yep, our hope is that the Biden administration would be historically bold. Bah-ha-ha. Bah-ha-ha. Make no mistakes. So this was done prior to November of 2020 when this was written. Our hope is that the Biden administration would be historically bold, but make no mistake that both our political and economic systems will collapse absent solutions that scale to the enormous size of the problem. Okay, that's exactly true. And that's kind of what my policies say. Central goal of our nation's economic policy must be nothing less than the doubling of median income. Must dramatically narrow inequality between distributions while eliminating racial and gender inequalities within them. This is the standard which we should hold leaders from both parties. To advocate for anything less, it would be cowardly or dishonest or both. That's a true statement. True statement. Okay, this is a pretty good article. I'll go ahead and share it again. The question just becomes, is that what they talk about during their during election time? All right, any questions, comments about that article or anything else before we move on? Anything? Whoa. Anything? Nothing? All right. I've covered an article on them before. It might even be this article, but it popped up in my feed again. Time, I've got 12 minutes. Thanks for checking. We should be able to get through this. This isn't too big. Yeah, we're good. We're good. The Spin Launch, a company hurls satellites into space using giant spinning machine. Thanks, Girly Bear. I appreciate it. Spin Launch's launcher, which is larger than the Statue of Liberty and works like the Olympic hammer throw event, just came online in New Mexico. Oh, I didn't know they were actually doing it. So what they do is they spin really fast, then launch something into the environment, launch into the atmosphere. Let's see what they have to say. Rocket fuel is very expensive, and burning it releases a lot of greenhouse gases. Like the Olympic hammer throw event, Spin Launch hurls satellites into space. The company says its approach will be 10 times cheaper and require 4 times less fuel. Yeah. When is this published? Okay, so this is December of last year, almost a year ago. Okay, good. Last time I read about this, they hadn't actually done something yet. They were still kind of in the testing phases. The future of satellite launches may be taking shape in New Mexico, where a startup just tested out a system designed to fling objects into space rather than blasting them into orbit with rockets. The challenge: to put satellites into space. You load them onto a rocket carrying a ton of propellant, then burn that propellant to create thrust. This allows a rocket to break free of Earth's gravity, and once it's high enough, it can release its payload. Development of reusable rockets has made this process a lot cheaper. We used to just have to eat the cost of an entire rocket as a part of the launch. But fuel is still very expensive, and burning it releases a lot of greenhouse gases. Satellite launches 2.0. California-based spaceflight startup Spin Launch is testing a different approach to satellite launches, one that involves spinning them really fast and then letting them go at just the right moment. Long live the Iraqi people down with the U.S. government. Fair. Welcome to the channel. you'll hear me say this, that the United States is the largest terrorist organization in the world. Yep, I agree. The Iraqi people are a victim of U.S. terrorism. So is Afghanistan. Is Haiti is going to be the new one, right? The Ukraine as well. Technically, so is Palestine, because we send millions a day to Israel, and as are the people in the Arabic states, because we trade partners with them, right? Yep. Welcome to the channel. The more crazy the project is, the better off you are just working on it rather than talking about it. It's sort of like the Olympic came here thinking you were a U.S. conservative. Sucker. Welcome. No, I'm far left. Far left. Here's my policy site. If you want to read my thoughts on the U.S. machine for war and terrorism. Oh, nope. He doesn't matter. That's there. And I don't write about U.S. imperialism so much on my blog. Oh, okay. Yeah, I haven't really written about U.S. imperialism on here besides talking about climate change. Interesting. It's sort of like the Olympic hammer throw event, but with satellites instead of metal. You're from Italy? Oh, okay. Welcome. I don't get too many people from Italy on here, so thanks for stopping by. I appreciate that. Yeah, we're reading this article on spin launch. We've covered them before. They basically spin something super fast, then fire something into the atmosphere to get it into orbit. I'll go ahead and show this again in case you want to check it out. And I'm from South Central Wisconsin in the United States. I get a lot of people from Europe. Probably half the people on typically tend to be from Europe or from the United States. One of the two. New fascist leader? Oh, yeah, I've heard about that. Yeah, there's a lot of that fascism going around. I mean, capitalism is fascist inherently. Cheesehead. Yes, that's exactly right. I haven't actually watched a Packer game in a long time. Well, I did see one actually about a month ago. I haven't had time to watch stuff in several years, honestly. I had 1 year where I watched a few games, but I haven't really watched anything the last few years. I've actually made a 3-part series with a YouTube person about Italy and the history of talent fishing. Oh, okay. Cool. Good for you. Yep. Both parties are fascist because they're both conservative. You got center-right, or far-right lunatic fringe, and Republicans, and center-right with the with the Democrats. You have zero left-leaning representation in this country. It sucks. Sucks a lot. All right, sort of like the Olympic hammer throw event, but with satellites instead of metal balls. And even Spin Launch's own CEO, Jonathan Yaney, knows that this sounds bizarre, which is why the startup has largely operated under the radar for the past 7 years. Okay, 7 years. Cool. I find the more audacious and crazy the okay, I read that. Just working on it rather than being out there talking about it. He told CNBC, we had to prove ourselves that we could actually pull this off. Project not seeming so crazy now, though. Yeah, so this is exactly the sort of things that we need to be doing to get things in orbit. Spin launch, and then there's like a mass driver sort of a thing where you can take like several mile long thing and then use a it's basically a rail cannon, a magnetically powered cannon, so you can launch things into space. I don't remember what that's called. But first flight on October 22nd, Spin Launch used a vacuum-sealed suborbital accelerator taller than the Statue of Liberty to spin a 10-foot-long projectile on a rotating arm until it reached a speed in the many thousands of miles an hour, according to Yaney. Okay, so they 22nd? This last year? Yeah, okay, so this is last year. All right, so last year they had their first, looks like their first test of it. Cool. When released out of the accelerator's barrel, the projectile flew to an altitude of tens of thousands of feet, he said. Spin Launch says its approach will be 10 times cheaper and require 4 times less fuel. Yeah, and they could get that fuel or the energy from sustainable sources as well. In the next 8 months, Spin Launch plans to conduct about 30 more tests of its suborbital accelerator in New Mexico, which is only putting 20% of its total power behind the first test flight. Oh, wow. Before building a larger orbital accelerator capable of putting satellites in orbit. Okay, so this is, okay, so they got the first one, which is the test, which makes sense. So they can scale it. We can essentially validate our aerodynamic models for what our orbital launch vehicles are going to be like, and it allows us to try out new technologies when it comes to release mechanisms, Yanni said. Okay, that makes sense. Scaling up. Spin Launch expects its orbital system will be able to deliver about 440 pounds. That's not a lot of payload into orbit per launch, the weight of 2 small satellites. During those satellite launches, the projectile will coast for about a minute before splitting open. A booster affixed to the payload will then give it an extra push to guide it into orbit. Oh, okay. So it's rocket assisted. Okay. Each payload will be a tiny fraction of what most rocket launches carry. SpaceX's Falcon 9, for instance, can carry over 50,000 pounds. Yeah, that's better. To low Earth orbit. Our Spin Launch says its approach will be 10 times cheaper and require 4 times less fuel than what is currently used to put payloads of its size into orbit. It also produces 0 emissions in the most critical layers of the atmosphere. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. If they're getting it most of the way into the orbit, then they're putting the heat and the pollution into the higher parts of the atmosphere, although it's still in the atmosphere. And because the system is so cheap, they can perform lots of launches, making up with volume what it lacks in payload size. The company is looking for a site for its orbital accelerator that can support dozens of launches per day, and it expects to conduct its first customer launches in late 2024. Okay, if Spin Launch can cut the cost of putting small satellites in space, the ripple effect could be huge. Microgravity gives scientists the ability to perform experiments that are impossible on Earth, and cheap access to it could lead to breakthroughs in tech, manufacturing, healthcare, and more. Spin Launch isn't the only company exploring unique ways to cut the cost of getting to space either. UK startup B2 Space is developing a balloon to carry rockets into the upper atmosphere. Oh, that's interesting. Like Spin Launch's system, that would cut both the cost of fuel and the amount of emissions released into the lower layers of the atmosphere, suggesting the future satellite launches might be cheaper and cleaner. Okay, so I would definitely like to see Spin Launch do something even larger. Yeah, I don't know how big some of the larger satellites are, but getting something larger, 1,000 pounds maybe. Okay, so we are at 5 o'clock. So I leave the end of my end of the stream for anything you guys want to say. Last minute comments before we call this a day. And also any questions, comments, or suggestions on this as well. I wonder if I have a link to this in my policies. I don't know. I think I do, but let's check. Nope, I don't. I'll look for that. All right. Yeah, thank you so much, Girly Bear, for showing up. I appreciate that. It's nice to have you on stream. You keep me on time. Good to see you. Glad to see you're doing okay. I don't have anything wild planned for this next week. This last week has been quiet. This weekend has been quiet. So next week I've got D&D. Nothing else is really going on with me. It's been a quiet week or two, which is good. Oh, actually, my dad's birthday was on Tuesday. We went and saw them on Wednesday, so that was kind of good. That's pretty much it. All right, anyone else? Last minute comments? Anybody? Oh, we're going to grandbabies next Saturday? Ooh. Yeah, Scatterbox, thank you so much. Thanks for following everything. Glad you found something of value here. Well, have fun with your grandbabies. I'm a bit away from that part. My daughter's only 13. I've got a little bit of time to wait on that yet. Well, everyone, have a great week. Thank you for gifting me with your time. Stay COVID free. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you guys next week. Well, let's see if my OBS is going to work. The credits, we work.